Committee on Agriculture and Livestock will come to order. The clerk call the roll.
Chair Gian,
Here.
Vice Chair Guerra. Here. Representative Kane.
Present.
Representative Hopper. Representative Kitzman. Here. Representative Lopez. Here. Representative McLaughlin. Here. Representative Money. Representative Munoz.
Quorum is present. As a reminder, anyone present that is testifying before the committee, please register at the kiosks located in the hallways behind the hearing rooms. If you require assistance in registering or testifying, please contact the committee staff. Finally, for those individuals who've been invited to participate virtually, the committee clerk will manage the Zoom and will turn on your video and audio when it is your turn to testify. Once admitted into the meeting, please unmute your microphone and silence any other audio feeds you may have running, such as this committee's live stream. Please also ensure that pursuant to House rules, you remain visible and audible for the duration of your testimony. Members and guests, before we begin today's hearing, I'd like to briefly go over the procedure we'll be following. We'll hear testimony by calling the entire panel at once. I'll verify each witness one at a time, starting with the first. After verification, we'll hear that witness's testimony. We'll then proceed to verify and hear from the next witness and continue in that order until all testimony has been presented. Once all witnesses have testified, I'll open the floor to questions from the members at that point. Are there any questions before we proceed, members? All right, let's call our first panel. Chair calls Commissioner Sid Miller of the Texas Department of Agriculture, Dr. Lewis R. Bud Dinges, Texas State veterinarian, Janine Coggeshall, General Counsel of the Texas Animal Health Commission, Dr. Philip Kaufman, the Department Head of Entomology at Texas A&M AgriLife Research, Corey Gann, Big Game Program Director at the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, Dr. Mike Watson, Administrator at the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, and Christopher Needham, Deputy Associate Administrator at the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service. A couple of those will be on the screen and are by Zoom. Okay, let's start with Commissioner.
Well, good to be with you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Sid Miller of the Texas Department of Agriculture.
We show you registered as Sid Miller, representing the Texas Department of Agriculture. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Testifying on
On the bill.
the subject.
Or on the subject. We don't
Yeah.
have a bill yet.
Yeah.
Right?
Go
So
ahead.
the New World screwworm is not a new pest that we've dealt with. We had the first outbreak. They started in 1930, and it took us until 1966 to eradicate them. And we did that with sterile male flies. They mate one time, and then that's it. So if you could get enough sterile male flies out there, you can eliminate them. But it took us 36 years to do that, so it's not a quick process. You've got to have overwhelming numbers of the sterile males to eliminate them. So we've recently had a outbreak in southern Mexico back in November. We closed the ports to exports. It kind of got away from them. Now it's in 7 different southern Mexican states. It was 700 miles from the Texas border originally. When it came across, it was 1,100 miles, so it's approaching us. Recently, within probably the last 10 days, we've had a case within 350 miles of the border. So it's advancing, which is bad news. To control this, we need enough. Right now, everybody says what we can to wipe them out. We need more sterile flies. There's one facility that's producing these, and they produce 100 million flies, and that's in Panama. But we need 600 million, so we don't have enough. Now the USDA sent $21 million to the Mexican government to convert an old medfly lab to screwworm lab, and it's going to be 18 months minimum for that to get up and running if the Mexican government spends the money correctly. We know how that goes. Sometimes doesn't always happen as according to plan, but at minimum that's 18 months away. And that'll give us 50 million to 100 million more, so tops 200 million. So we're still at 20%. It's not enough to knock them down. Now, there is legislation being filed. It hasn't been heard. It hadn't been passed in Congress to create a facility in South Texas at the Moore Air Force Base that the USDA owns that would get us up to the 600 million, but very best circumstances, that's 3 years away. So within 3 years, Texas and all the southern United States will be fully infected is my fear. So having researched this and, you know, I don't know why, but just talking to the mayor, there's another one of these meetings in Uvalde. But for some reason, even though the USDA considers the Texas Department of Agriculture the lead agency on this, since we provide biosecurity, and that we are charged by you, the legislature, protecting Texas from invasive species and invasive insects, we're never included on any of these meetings. When the Animal Health Commission has a meeting, or AgriLife, or groups like the cattle raisers, we're always excluded. So maybe we could fix that today, because I think we need all of us working together to the same end, especially since we're to be the lead agency. Yes, Representative.
Yeah, Commissioner, thank you. I remember when I was a kid, Moore Air Base, because I grew up in Edinburgh, Texas, and I remember going to Moore Air Base and seeing the facility there. What's the status of Moore Air Base now? Because back then they used to use old DC-3s, and what's the story on that?
Well, it's now controlled by the USDA, actually, Representative, and they're putting several $1 million into that facility to get it up and ready to be a dispersal airport for these new screwworm flies that we're going to get. But in a minute, I'm going to tell you we're going to disperse something else out of there besides screwworm flies. It's going to be very helpful to eradicating the screwworm. So we eradicated the screwworm in 1966, and but we had a resurgence, a reinfestation in about 1976 and 77. So at that time, there was research done by the USDA, and it's in this book. I can get you references to it, on a bait. And this bait was the attractant was Swarm Lure 2, which is the bait which we put in the traps back then. It's an improved variety now, but gone from 4 all the way up to Swarm Lure 5. And they mix this bait with a chemical called dichlorophos. And when they put that bait out, their research and results showed that it would kill up to 90% of the screwworm flies. Once they got it to that portion, that amount, then they could they would have enough screwworm male flies to drop and could clean it up. And they wiped that out very quickly in 1976 and 77. It was a combination of this bait and coming behind that. It took anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks to get the population down to 10%, kill 90% of them, and then they would finish it off with the sterile flies, and that's what we're proposing today. Raymond, bring that trap up, and I want to pass it around so they can look at it and the bait. We put fly traps out on the border. I've got about 1,100 traps down there. I've got trappers, full-time trappers. We don't trap screwworm flies, but we do Mediterranean fruit flies, gypsy moth, boll weevils, things like that. So working with the USDA, we have come up with there's not a trap for the screwworm fly, so we've developed one, and this is the trap, and this is the bait. Mayor, you might want to just kind of smell that package, but don't smell it long, because it's to mimic the rotten flesh of a cow or something, and that's what attracts the screwworms to it. So meeting with Secretary Rollins Saturday and her chief of staff, they are 100% behind developing this bait again and dispersing out of Moore Air Force Base. It's a combination of Swarm Lure 5 and dichlorophos, and now this chemical's been around since 1950s, so it's used in barns, food service areas, things like that, to fumigate and get rid of insects. But you can actually buy home pest strips at the garden center or the feed store with this in it, so it's relatively safe and put out in your home or around your facilities. So with that combination, we can drop that out, hopefully within this. I think the Swarmler 5 is going to work better than the old version of it. So hopefully we can get the population knocked down where we can use less sterile flies, not have to have 600 million of them. And that's the plan. So we have got this trap. Today we're sending it to USDA. They're going to take it down into Mexico and deploy it and test it out for us, make sure that it's worked. But this is the attractant that has been used in Central America and previously to monitor the screwworm fly. So we're prepared to spend several $100,000 on those traps and to get those out. We want to put them not only on the border, Mr. Chairman, but we want to put them around the cruise ship terminals in case we've got some hitchhikers. Most of those cruise ship terminals go down to southern Mexico, Cancun, the Yucatan Peninsula, Central America, and that's where the high infestations are. So our greatest fear is that fly won't travel 600-700 miles on its own, but it'll hitchhike on one of those cruise ships. So we want to monitor those as well as the border. So that's pretty much it. That's the plan. We have 100% buy-in from the Brooke Rollins and the USDA to develop this. There is this bait doesn't exist. We'll have to come up with it. But there are over 50 fly bait products registered by the TDA now. So we've got a lot of people that would be interested in manufacturing this for us so we can get it out.
Go ahead.
Chairman, when I was a kid, I remember the old DC-3s that were being used. They were from World War II. What type of planes are they using now to drop this bait?
Well, I don't know that I can answer that because we hadn't dropped any bait yet, but that'll be up to the USDA. They have people on contract now. They are dropping flies, so it'll be those same aircraft that they're using now. So they have been dropping the sterile flies since I guess November of last year. We've had some issues with the Mexican government not cooperating. I talked to the secretary about that Saturday, and she said we will now have full cooperation from the Mexican government, and she didn't see any problem about getting this product, dispersed. We do not have to have EPA approval to use this product because we're not dropping it in the United States. That will be something that will be up to the Mexican government, and the secretary didn't seem concerned about that being a deal breaker.
Representative Kane.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. What was the agency's role, I guess, in previous, outbreak issues with the New World screwworm? Were y'all part of that last time?
Well, I was 11 years old the last
right
time
on.
we had an
I
outbreak.
guess I'm just curious about the agency's role.
I can tell you this, that the Texas Department of Agriculture, we provide biosecurity for the state. And y'all have actually upped our ability to do that by increasing our FTEs and appropriations. So we set up perimeters around the state. We have permanent road stations. We pull trucks over. We go through them, make sure they don't have any pests, diseases, invasive plant species, things like that. We set up around the state mobile units, where we're least expected, and we also pull those trucks over. But we also inspect large garden centers, home improvement centers. We'll go in and find citrus trees that may not be here that need to be destroyed. So it's not uncommon for us to show up anywhere in the state. We inspect flea markets, garden centers,
I think
feed
that's where I was
stores, you
going,
name it.
was towards those biosecurity efforts. And who would be leading those efforts at the agency with regards to biosecurity?
Well, my chief of staff is currently over that. We've got Keith Majors here and Raimundo Del Bosque, and they're here with me today.
Fantastic. Those may be somebody we'd like to hear from, but thank you, sir.
Sure.
Let the record reflect that Representative Money is present and Representative Hopper is present. Also like to welcome Representative Trey Warden, who's joining us here, represents Walker County and a few counties in that region. Appreciate you being here. And I thought DeRazio was here, but well, he's back. I don't know why come up here. All right. Members, Representative McLaughlin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for coming today. Appreciate all of you being here for this. So if you're available, I texted the people, this meeting in Uvalde was put together in a little under a week because of the case that you mentioned being 360 miles from the border.
Sure.
To try to do it. So I texted them while we were here, and I would like to invite you all to be at this meeting on Wednesday. I sent your phone, if I still have the right cell phone number, an agenda of it. It's 9 a.m. till 1 on this Wednesday. And anybody else who would like to come, you're more than welcome to come.
Well, I'll certainly check my schedule. If there's any way possible, I'll be there personally myself. If not, I'll send my biosecurity team down there and we'll, thank you for inviting us. Like I said, in the past, that hasn't been the case. We've been kind of not part of the party, but we think that since we're the lead agency on this, that we should have some input.
I think you should be front and center.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. Members, we're going to continue with the panel. I'd ask to hold questions until the end so we can streamline this as best we can, and then we can ask questions of all of the entire panel. Okay, we're going to proceed with the Texas Animal Health Commission. Chair calls Dr. Lewis R. Bud Dinges and Janine Coggeshall.
Correct.
All right. We'll start with.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, committee members, for having us here to testify today.
Hey, let me do this right
I'm sorry.
again. We have you down as Dr. Lewis R. Bud Dinges, Texas State Veterinarian, representing the Texas Animal Health Commission, testifying on the subject.
Yes,
Is
sir.
that correct?
Absolutely.
Please
You bet.
continue.
And thank you for having us here today to testify, just to talk to Commissioner Miller's point there. As far as those meetings that have been taking place, we have not been the organizer of those meetings and have been a guest of people that are producing those meetings. So we are not trying to exclude the Texas Department of Agriculture in any of these functions, and we have a weekly call with our state response partners, and we include Texas Department of Agriculture on that weekly call. So just to clarify that. So if you have my presentation, you can follow along with me. If there's any maps or charts, I'll make sure I note the page number that I'm referring to. So just so you know, the New World screwworm is considered a foreign pest and is considered a foreign animal disease. So the Texas Animal Health Commission, in dealing with the United States Department of Agriculture, APHIS Veterinary Services, we are considered the lead agency here in the state in response to this foreign animal disease. As far as the New World screwworm goes, it is the larvae, or the maggot, if you will, of the New World screwworm fly, Cochleomya hominivorax, which actually means man-eating. The fly causes a painful condition called New World screwworm myiasis. The New World screwworm fly lays eggs in open wounds and orifices of living tissue. The eggs hatch into parasitic larvae, and the maggots burrow or screw into with their sharp mouth hooks into living flesh. The wounds can expand, and infestations can often cause serious or deadly damage to the animal. Some hosts for the New World screwworm fly are primarily livestock and wildlife. They can also affect birds as well as companion animals such as dogs and cats, and they will occasionally impact humans. If you'll refer to the life cycle of the screwworm on page 4 there, the adult screwworm fly will usually live 10 to 14 days. The males can live as long as 30 days. So after copulation, the female will lay eggs on day 7 to 9 of her adult life. The eggs will then hatch into larvae after about 12 to 14 hours. The larvae will appear in the wound after about 3 days, and then larvae will mature and then drop out of the wound after about 5 to 7 days, and then drop off and burrow into the ground 2 to 3 inches of topsoil or organic matter, and then they will pupate. after about 6 or 8 days, and then an adult fly will emerge. This life cycle will take on average 21 days. It can take as few as little as 18 days up to 24 days, depending on ambient temperature. The female fly deposits eggs around the wounds, and the wound can be as small as a tick bite, or it will deposit eggs in mucous membranes associated with the eyes, nose, mouth, ears. It may lay eggs in the anus or genitalia, or it has a predilection for the umbilicus of a newborn animal. The larvae enter the wound and feed on living tissue. This distinguishes a New World screwworm fly larvae from that of the ordinary maggot that you might see feeding off of the dead or decaying tissue on the periphery of the wound. So multiple infestations in one wound can occur. Like I said, you will have other blowflies, if you will, that are in the periphery of the wound feeding on dead tissue, along with the New World screwworm fly that's feeding on the live tissue down deep in the wound. The New World screwworm is not contagious animal to animal. So the fly are capable of traveling anywhere from 6 to 12 miles to find a suitable host. Usually they will not fly over 2 miles if there are suitable hosts within that range. The movement of infested livestock or wildlife can lead to the spread of the fly even faster at longer distances. So we think this is what's been going on as the flies migrated north from Central America and made its way to Mexico in such a short period of time. So the eradication method, the eradication is accomplished through the sterile insect technique. Sterilized male flies are released to mate in the area with an established New World screwworm population that they will actually mate with the wild type flies. So the females only mate once in their lifetime. They will lay non-viable eggs, so over multiple life cycles, you have a decrease in the number of flies in the population. So New World screwworms were successfully eradicated in 1966 using the sterile insect technique. Eradication efforts cost stakeholders tens of millions of dollars. Today, freedom from this pest provides approximately $1 billion in direct benefits to livestock producers and approximately $3.7 billion in benefits to the general economy annually. Eradication programs were successful for the New World screwworms through Mexico, which they were eradicated in 1991, and down through Central America to the Darien Gap in 2006. Keep in mind that the New World screwworms are endemic in the countries of Cuba, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic, as well as countries in South America. Increased cost of production related to New World screwworms are from animal deaths, decreased livestock production, increased need for veterinary services, increased need for medication and insecticide, as well as extra labor and vehicle cost for inspections and treatments of animals. If you refer to page 11 of your handout there, talking about the economic impact. We did have infestations in the state of Texas back in the 70s. This was due to Mexico still having the screwworm endemic there. So this chart here shows the estimated losses of Texas in 1976, and the numbers were extrapolated out and adjusted for inflation only. So in 1976, Texas had 173 infested counties and approximately 15,000 cases of New World screwworms. The states of New Mexico and Arizona were also dealing with New World screwworm infestations at that time. But keep in mind, there was a facility in Mexico that was just opened in 1976 that produced 500 million sterile flies a week. And at that time, Texas also had a facility at the Moore Airfield Base there in Mission, Texas, that produced 200 million sterile flies a week. So we had that going for us at that time. So inflation adjustment figures there. Today we have 12.2 million head of cattle in the state of Texas. I don't know that the cost per case does justice to today's figures. What they would be, this says $452 per case in cattle. An estimated $732 million of loss to producers, and then $1.8 billion loss to the overall economy in Texas, and that's on an annual basis due to New World screwworm infestation. So, like I said, it grossly underestimates when we have a 500-pound calf that's being sold at auction today, anywhere from 10, 15 to upwards of 20 times of what a calf was bringing back in 1976. So we need to take that in consideration. Also, it doesn't take into account for the billions of dollars the Texas annual hunting economy. The New World screwworm fly decimated the fawn crop and white-tailed deer back in the 60s. It killed probably 60 to 80% of the fawn crop at that time.
What about monitoring at the stockyards? Could you touch on that? Is there any monitoring that goes on at the stockyards?
Not presently, no, sir. We in the South Texas, we do monitor for cattle fever ticks. We would obviously note any open wounds with maggots on those cattle being put through the livestock markets. And then we have our cattle fever tick, our inspectors that deal with the cattle fever tick eradication program on a daily basis that are monitoring cattle down in the 8 counties along the southern border for ticks. And you can also check for any presence of susceptible wounds or any infested wounds with maggots.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So moving on my presentation, you can see death loss was the number one cost associated with New World screwworms back in the 70s. Of course, there is cost related to eradication of the New World screwworms, to include public education, research for more effective treatments, surveillance activities, and then the big cost is the sterile insect technique expenditures. I've heard cost of building a new sterile fly production facility anywhere from $350 million to $650 million. And then also, as far as regulatory veterinary medicine goes, we're faced with redirecting personnel from other disease programs and activities. So clinical signs associated with New World screwworms, obviously, like I mentioned before, the larvae will appear in the wound after about day 3. There is a bloody serosanguinous discharge associated with the wound. There's a foul odor associated with the wound, and you talk to the generations that have dealt with this issue before, and that is one thing that comes to mind, the distinct odor that is associated with New World screwworms. Obviously, you may have a small wound, but deep down in that wound, you may have infested pockets of screwworms. The animal may be depressed, off feed, separate themselves from the herd, self-isolate. If the screwworm larvae are in the nasal passages or the ear, you might see the animal shaking their head. So as far as the sickness, it varies with the age of the animal and the body part that's affected. Animals can become systemically ill from secondary bacterial infections over time. Treatment with parasiticides early on in the infestation can be successful. As far as mortality goes, if the animal's left untreated, they can die after 7 to 14 days. And like I mentioned before, the screwworm fly does have an affinity for the wet navel of a newborn animal, which can ultimately lead to 100% mortality in those animals. As far as treatments go, there are some approved topical permethrin pesticides. Systemic treatments, there are none currently labeled for the use of New World screwworms in the United States. Those products would only be able to be used under a licensed veterinarian and would be used as extra label. So we will discuss those treatment options a little bit later in the presentation. So in South America and Central America, the well-managed operations have fewer issues of New World screwworms. They routinely inspect their livestock for suspicious wounds or maggots. Also, they inspect their facilities so their facilities are not causing any harm or injuries to their cattle or livestock as they're moved through those facilities. They pay attention to ectoparasite control. Like I mentioned before, a wound as small as a tick bite can be enough to attract a New World screwworm fly. And also timing of animal husbandry practices such as dehorning and castration are closely observed and take place in times of the year where the New World screwworm might not be so dense. Obviously, they pay attention to the young animal and treat the umbilicus of the newborn animal to help dry and make it heal faster. So as far as the timeline goes, as far as New World screwworms, in 2022 we saw an increase cases in Panama. July of 2023, they saw increases in Costa Rica. In March of 2024, the Texas Animal Health Commission started to take notice of this northern migration. We began to prepare information, documents, and fact sheets in regards to New World screwworms. September 2024, New World screwworms were detected in Honduras. October of 2024, our Assistant State Veterinarian, Dr. T.R. Lanchford, was instrumental in passing a resolution with the United States Animal Health Association's Parasitic and Vector-Borne Disease Committee. The Board of Directors passed this resolution, and then they hand-delivered it to the USDA in hopes of the USDA appropriating more money to New World screwworm control and eradication, bringing more attention to their control and eradication efforts, and also to do a risk assessment on what New World screwworms would look like if we were infested here in the United States once again. Halloween of October 24, New World screwworms were detected in Guatemala. The Friday before Thanksgiving in November of 24, they were detected in southern state of Chiapas in Mexico. In January and February 25, they were detected in Mexican states of Campeche, Tabasco, Quintana Roo, and the Yucatan. And then April and May of 2025, they moved northward to Veracruz and Oaxaca, Mexico. So why was this northern expansion in the New World screwworm? What's it due to? Some thoughts that COVID-19 may have had a part to play. There were challenges in staffing of inspection points in Panama. Perhaps there were supply chain issues. Also, the Darien Gap, the landscape in the Darien Gap is changing. They deforested to create grazing lands where cattle from South America were brought up in that area and grazed. Those cattle made their way from the Darien Gap through Central America, up through Central America, and into Mexico to be put into feed yards. And also, there is some thought that the sterile fly strain may have lost some of its efficacy. There was a new sterile fly strain created back in August of 2024, and that strain of flies is currently put in place. So as far as in July, the number of cases in Mexico, the current status, there are 3,820 cases. That's as of July 11th. There are 29 confirmed cases in humans. There are incidents, the new cases, anywhere from 3 to 350 cases per week. And they're seeing those cases mainly in the southern states of Chiapas and Quintana Roo. If you'll refer to the map on page 23 in regards to the current status in Mexico, there was a case noted in a 2-month-old calf on July 8th, which is 160 miles south or 160 miles north of the current dispersal grid. The dispersal grid ends right there to the left of that darker green color on the map. And that case is 380 miles south of the U.S. border. Like I said, it was found in a 2-month-old calf there. Mexico has set up a 12-mile radius around this infected premises. They're supposedly doing active surveillance where they're trapping live flies and as well as inspecting livestock. They've increased their outreach to producers in the area, and they're doing targeted sterile fly release in this area. If you'll refer to the map on the next page, it's kind of busy there. But if you will note there, the legend on the left, the different colors, the different state infestations, starting with green in Panama, down there, moving up through the gray there in Mexico. There are the numbered stars there. If you'll note on that legend to the left there, dates notes the date of the declared emergency when the number of New World screwworms was reached. So the country would declare a state of emergency due to New World screwworms. And then to talk a little bit about Mexico, it was detected in November of 2024. And you can see the different colored flags there. Note the different, the latest, if you will, northern case to be discovered. So the latest of that case was one we just discussed in the previous page there, which is 160 miles north of the flight distribution grid. If you'll see, I'll refer to the Isthmus of Tehuantepec there, which is the narrowest spot between the Gulf of Mexico and the Pacific Ocean there in the country of Mexico. And that's kind of where the flight grids have been stationed around here in the last couple of months. But just to let you know what's been going on or what's not been going on in Mexico, the USDA sent down a team of individuals or staff back first part of July. They went to Mexico City to look at the diagnostic lab capabilities. They also looked at what Mexico was doing as far as informing the producers in the state and the general public in the state as far as New World screwworms go. They did say that they had sufficient laboratory capacity and that they were informing the general public and producers well. They sent 4 more teams down the latter part of June. They were to look at animal movement, inspection stations, looking at surveillance and wildlife, so on and so forth. And apparently none of this is being conducted. None of this is being done. So to date, Mexico has not been a willing participant in this effort. The flies have been there for 8 months. And we'll talk more about the fly distribution grids here in a minute. So July the 9th, Secretary Rollins closed the southern border due to the detection there in Veracruz. The border has been closed. It was closed back in November of last year once they detected screwworms there in Mexico for the first time. It was reopened under good faith in January after the USDA and Seneca developed inspection protocols and treatment protocols for cattle that are being imported. I believe the border was shut down again May 11th. And then it was reopened to Mexico on July the 7th. And then, like I mentioned, it was shut down just 2 days later, July the 9th, after the detection of the case in that calf in Veracruz there. So as far as their eradication prevention efforts there, as far as the air and ground dispersal goes, all of the production there in the Panama Copeg facility, all that production has shifted and being dispersed there in Mexico. It was pretty rough going in the very beginning. Mexico was not allowing the aviation contractors to land at certain airports. They were wanting every airport to have permits and did not want the planes to fly over restricted airspace, so on and so forth. They were not allowing airports to have hangar space to do general maintenance and repair to these planes. They were wanting to put tariffs on the flies coming up from Panama. They were not allowing the planes to distribute flies 7 days a week. They didn't want to work on the weekends. So hopefully we're getting some of that worked out. I talked to one of the aviation contractors at the end of June. He said they still do not have a hangar space to do maintenance and repair on airplanes. So like I said, they want to form or intended to form a buffer zone there on the Isthmus of Tehuantepec there in Mexico, where they're going to disperse these 100 million flies that are produced from the Panamanian facility. Those flies are brought up to a dispersal center there in Tuxtla, Mexico, and then, or the pupae are brought up there. They are allowed to hatch into the fly, and then the flies are moved up into the states of Veracruz and Oaxaca and distributed there just north of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. So, like I mentioned, the current sterile fly production there is 110 million at the Copec facility. There have been thoughts early on that if we could stop the fly there at the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, it would take 200 million flies to stop it and start pushing the fly back south into Central America. We've heard numbers of 400 to 500 million flies now that may be needed per week to be distributed to stop the northern spread and push them back down into Central America. May the 28th, Mexico agreed to convert a sterile convert a fruit fly production facility to a sterile New World screwworm fly production facility, supported by $21 million from the USDA. The Mexican government is to put forth 39 to 40 million US dollars on that facility, estimated to be open perhaps in July of 2026. As far as response and preparedness for from the USDA, the APHIS International Services took over the distribution of the flies, helped coordinate that in Central American companies. That was done in May and June of 2024. In March of 2025, the APHIS Veterinary Services took over this process and started managing the New World screwworm fly response as an with an incident management team. They developed strike teams, one for the Southeast United States, one for the Southwest United States, using dedicated people to assist states with response should we need to respond. Texas Animal Health Commission was fortunate to have 4 people take part in the training that they held back in May. And USDA continues to develop and refine response plans in their playbook. They have modified their green book, which is their response strategy. They're continue to work on their playbook. The Animal Health Commission has a meeting with them on the 4th and 5th of August to work through some gaps in these playbooks, or in this playbook. The USDA is working to establish a sterile fly dispersal center there at the Moorfield Air Base there in Mission, Texas. They're converting a hangar. They're going to fly, if needed, they will bring up the production from Panama there and store it, and then it will be dispersed out of that facility if we need it to respond to an infestation. They are also looking at building a New World screwworm production facility there at the Moorfield Air Base. There is a foot pad there that they can use. They've sent a team of planners down to Copeg facility in Panama. They've sent engineers and contractors down to look at that facility as well. So hopefully money will be appropriated for that, and hopefully they can get started on a New World screwworm production facility here in the United States at some point. ARS, the Agricultural Research Station, or Agricultural Research Service, has folks on the ground there in Panama at the Copec facility monitoring the strain of flies that are being produced on a daily basis. The ARS entomologists have been instrumental in helping us train our field inspectors and field staff, and we have worked with the ARS entomologist to help come up with alternative treatment strategies. And we will pass those lists on to the FDA and EPA shortly. We did take part in a roundtable with Secretary Rollins there at the Moorfield Air Base on June 18th, where she talked about her 5-prong approach to battle the New World screwworms. One of those being stopping the pest from spreading in Mexico and ensure we are full partners in eradication. The second piece being protect the U.S. border at all cost. Third, maximize our readiness. Fourth, take the fight to the screwworm. And fifth, innovating our way to eradication. I know they've had several listening sessions in the last couple of weeks to allow the private sector to provide their thoughts on how we can control and eradicate the New World screwworm. As far as preparedness efforts go, as far as Texas Animal Health Commission go, like I said, we've been monitoring and preparing for the situation since March of 2024. We have New World screwworm planning. A focus has been of our emergency management folks for almost a year now, a little over a year. We have weekly New World screwworm collaboration calls with state response partners to work on plan development. We've done that since December of 24. We've had internal and external working groups developing response plans to the three-legged stool, if you will, as far as treatment, surveillance, and movement control goes of animals. We've submitted a final draft of our initial inspection and movement protocols to the USDA, and we've also shared those with other states in the National Association of State Animal Health Officials. We've got a working group formed in that NAFSAHO group to look at interstate movement protocols and interstate movement regulations. And we continue to work with the USDA, FDA, and EPA to expand treatment options for New World screwworms. Like I mentioned, the treatment or the preparedness efforts in the response plan that likened it to a stool with 3 legs. One leg of the 3-legged stool is sterile fly production. I mentioned before the Panamanian facility, COPEG facility, is the only one that we have disposal or we have in North America, in Central America, at our disposal. Produce 110 million sterile flies a week. We discussed the Mexico facility where they're going to convert the fruit fly production facility. That facility could possibly produce 60 million to 100 million sterile flies a week. And then we talked about the United States, the more airfield base where they're going to turn a hangar into a dispersal center, and hopefully sooner than later we can have a sterile fly production facility built there at the Moore Airfield Base. Also looking at systematic and pharmaceutical treatments with the Texas Parks and Wildlife, USDA, ARS. We're working to identify those list of products. We're also identifying manufacturing companies that are working with the FDA for approval of other drugs and pesticides that are being used in South America. And then those companies that are looking for emergency approval of drugs that may be labeled for other uses in the United States that can be used for treatment, control, and prevention of New World screwworms. There are some topical treatments already approved, permethrin sprays, and we are working with the EPA to expand the approved list of products as well. The second leg of the stool, we talked about quarantine and movement restrictions of animals. We need to have this in place to safeguard and mitigate risk of other parts of the state and country. Quarantine areas will be established and required. The animals will be required to be inspected, treated, whatever that looks like. The animals will need to be identified, and then they will need to be documented. And those document will need to move with those animals when they move out of the area. But we are committed to continuity of operations and continuity of business. So we will take that into consideration as we enact our response plan. The third leg of the response plan is surveillance. It's critical to understand the location of New World screwworm infestations. Reporting of the New World screwworm infestation is critical. It obviously slows the spread caused by movement of infestations of domestic animals. It helps protect the marketability of from animals and livestock of the entire state, and it promotes eradication efforts when we have sterile flies at our disposal. We know where the flies need to be distributed. Currently, last week, Secretary Rollins asked that there some New World screwworm fly surveillance begin on the southern border here in Texas. We're working with USDA to get that done. They are building 100 traps today, which those traps will be distributed from Brownsville all the way up to Del Rio. We hope to have those traps in place by the end of the week and start to harvest some flies that we procure in these traps or catch in these traps. So that work is in place and ongoing, and hopefully we'll get that surveillance started at the end of the week. As far as communication goes, Texas Animal Health Commission has distributed outreach materials and done presentations. We've distributed guides and guidance documents to veterinarians and producers. We've produced New World screwworm fact sheets. We've collaborated with USDA, APHIS, Texas Parks and Wildlife, AgriLife Extension, Texas A&M University, Department of State Health Services. We've been on the road. We've done numerous extension meetings, county, and met with county governments, done industry meetings, and we've also presented in other states. We do have joint information coordination calls bi-weekly with our state partners, and we also have bi-weekly calls with our industry partners as well. And then we have a weekly National Association of State Animal Health Officials working group call on a weekly basis, like I mentioned. Preparedness efforts, training. We trained all of our field staff back in the fall before New World screwworms made their way to Mexico on inspection of suspicious wounds with maggots. We trained them how to collect samples, how to treat these wounds, and how to submit those wounds to the National Veterinary Services Laboratory for diagnostics. We've circled back and started working with the APHIS Veterinary Services on training and planning. We are working to get our field staff trained. We offer the overview and give the current status of New World screwworms in Mexico. We talk about the aspects of what response will look like. We share with them our public information and public outreach and education. We also have we're fortunate to have a entomologist from the USDA Agricultural Research Service help train them on fly identification, fly trapping, and fly behavior. We have over 60 of our field staff currently trained. We have a training tomorrow and Wednesday in Gonzales. And also we've offered interagency training with the Texas Parks and Wildlife, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension agents, as well as our industry folks, TSCR brand inspectors, and special rangers as well. So we have a protocol in place for the general public and producers to report any suspicious wounds. We've treated this as a foreign animal disease reporting. We get a foreign animal disease number from the USDA. We facilitate the collection of larvae from these wounds. We'll help ship those samples off to NVSL and wait for diagnostic returns. The producer or general public can reach out to any of our offices, our 6 offices, region offices around the state, and we have a 1-800 number they can call after hours and contact our veterinarians on the weekends as well. So we're prepared for the worst and hoping for the best. Just to remind you that we're not in a crisis mode, we're in awareness and preparedness mode. And steps that producers can take now is monitor their animals on a regular basis for myiasis or a suspicious wound that might have maggots present in it. And like I said, they can report suspicious wounds in livestock and companion animals to the Animal Health Commission, any accredited veterinarian, any USDA veterinary medical officer or animal health technician, AgriLife Extension agents. If it's in wildlife, they can report to the Texas Parks and Wildlife. The main thing is if you suspect an animal is infested with New World screwworms, we do not want to move that animal. So thank you. That concludes my testimony, and I'll entertain any questions you might have.
All right, we'll go on to, you might need to switch spaces there or maybe move the mic over, but Ms. Coggeshall, we have you registered as Janine Coggeshall, representing the Texas Animal Health Commission, testifying on the subject. Is that correct?
That is correct. I don't have any
Please
prepared
continue.
testimony, but I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay, well, move forward then to the next person, and then we'll have questions at the end. We show you registered as Dr. Philip Kaufman, representing Texas A&M AgriLife Research, testifying on the bill, on the subject. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Please proceed.
Thank you for having me here. As you said, I'm Phil Kaufman, Department Head for the Department of Entomology at Texas A&M's College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. My field of study includes this particular fly, and I helped with the 2016 New World screwworm infestation in the Florida Keys, where it killed 15% of the endangered key deer. On the second slide, you'll see some information that we put together. The New World screwworm is a pest so damaging that it was decided eradication was a better solution than management. And understanding the biology and history of this fly, much of which you've heard here earlier, reveals why its control remains a vital yet complex endeavor. The screwworm is a parasitic fly that is native to the Western Hemisphere. And this fly, as you heard, lays its eggs only in fresh wounds of living animals, living warm-blooded animals. The larvae reach 2/3 of an inch in size as they feed on the host's flesh, causing severe damage and often death if untreated. The pest was eradicated in the U.S. in the 1960s, but occasionally reemerges. However, the current resurgence in Central America and Mexico is unprecedented. These flies can only be eradicated through the release of sterile males, known as the sterile insect technique, as demonstrated in the original eradication program, as well as in the 2016 Florida outbreak. Should this insect enter the U.S., the potential losses are conservatively estimated at $2.1 billion to the cattle industry and $9 billion to the hunting and wildlife industry in Texas. Just this month, as you heard, the detection of the fly jumped from about 600 miles to 370 miles from the U.S. border. Please refer to slide 4 for a detailed map, and it's very similar to what Dr. Dingus had shown you. Not only is the fly much closer to the area of Mexico where it may thrive, allowing it to move north more quickly due to highly suitable habitat and the presence of concentrated livestock operations. Unfortunately, most of the insecticides that were available when the screwworm was last in Texas are no longer available. We currently have 2 insecticides for on-animal treatments. So when you hear 8 to 10, it's really 2 types of chemicals that are available. So, and referring to slide 5 here, as science advances, we should be looking to how we can more effectively and economically fight this pest by leveraging modern technology. For instance, we could immediately double the capacity of the current infrastructure by producing only male flies. And yes, this is something that's currently possible. There are several areas where the screwworm research community believes they can deliver usable tools within the next few years to support fly control. And I have these listed on slide 5. So detection includes using AI-driven automated fly traps, environmental DNA, and remote sensors for the detection of early-stage infestations. Agile management includes both reinstating known and developing new insecticides to provide products for livestock and wildlife systems. Enhanced eradication includes improving sterile fly production with AI tools and using modern genomic tools to deliver fly-killing genetic transformations to the wild fly population. Workforce development includes leveraging partnerships with APHIS to lead student training programs in screwworm control and producer engagement to support APHIS strike teams, state-level regulatory agencies, and extension professionals. Eradicating this fly back to the Panama Canal will take at least a 5-fold increase in sterile fly production, something we are unable to do given the current facility constraints. While production facilities are debated and perhaps even built, we need to prepare for the fly's arrival in Texas by developing a proactive, not a reactive strategy. Waiting to respond to the fly's arrival in Texas will result in additional suffering and economic devastation. As the Florida outbreak demonstrated, large numbers of animals can quickly succumb to this fly, and although that outbreak was successfully managed, it was a small island and still required more than 8 months to succeed. And lastly, the screwworm is not just a producer issue. This is a public health concern, as the fly is indifferent as to which mammal it infests, including humans, their companion animals, and those that are in urban settings. And with that, I'll end my testimony, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. We have you registered as Corey Gann with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, representing the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, testifying on the subject, is that correct?
That's correct.
Please proceed.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Corey Gann. I'm the Big Game Program Director for the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. It's very evident that all warm-blooded mammals can be infested by New World screwworms. Regarding wildlife, species that are more commonly affected are deer, rabbits, small mammals, and turkeys. We don't have great wildlife population data from the 1960s, but it is evident that New World screwworms suppressed wildlife populations in Texas during this time. Using white-tailed deer as an example, there was an estimated 1 million white-tailed deer in Texas when eradication efforts of New World screwworms started in the 1950s. By the time New World screwworms were eradicated from Texas in 1966, that white-tailed deer population had grown to 3 million. We currently have around 5 million white-tailed deer in the state of Texas today. Impacts on wildlife then were not as much of a concern as they are today. Today, income generated from wildlife management is important to rural economies and property owners. In Texas, 753,000 deer hunters generate $4.6 billion in annual economic output. When we add on the landowner economic output, that number jumps to $9.6 billion. And in the recent past, many properties have been purchased for wildlife management purposes. TPWD is currently working in lockstep with the Texas Animal Health Commission on the response to the New World screwworm threat. We currently have multiple weekly coordination calls with multiple agencies to discuss New World screwworm movement, surveillance, and response to enhance consistency in communications and messaging, and to ensure alignment across state and federal agencies. Working jointly with Texas Animal Health Commission, we've trained around 65 TPWD biologists, game wardens, and state park staff on New World screwworm background, sampling procedures, and submission of samples for positive identification to the national lab. We've got 10 additional staff going to an Animal Health Commission training this week in Gonzales, and there are plans for additional trainings of staff with Animal Health Commission in August. At the direction of Governor Greg Abbott, the Texas Animal Health Commission and the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department have formed a joint response team to coordinate efforts and address the potential impact posed by the New World screwworm. This response team will serve as a central hub for coordination, information sharing, and stakeholder engagement among state, federal, and industry partners. Regarding communication and outreach, TPWD has formed an internal New World screwworm response team made up of staff from the Wildlife Division, Communications, State Parks, and Law Enforcement. The goal of this response team is to facilitate information flow and coordination across TPWD divisions. Our goal is to facilitate outreach to license holders, permit holders, landowners, state parks visitors, and the general public. We're currently working on outreach documents. We do have a general New World screwworm informational document that provides general screwworm background, as well as how to report suspected cases of New World screwworm to TPWD, Texas Animal Health Commission, and the Department of State Health Services. We're also developing guidance documents for landowners and hunters, deer breeders and wildlife rehabilitators, and informational flyers to be posted at state parks and on our wildlife management areas. We've also recently launched the TPWD New World screwworm website to provide TPWD contacts for suspected New World screwworm case reporting, links to agency partners like the USDA and Texas Animal Health Commission and the Department of State Health Services, as well as TPWD-specific New World screwworm documents and guidance. Regarding surveillance efforts, early detection is going to be crucial. Prompt detection of New World screwworms in wildlife allows for rapid response efforts, including sterile insect release programs to contain outbreaks and prevent further spread of livestock and other animals. Currently, TPWD is investigating a role in active surveillance on TPWD-owned properties like state natural areas, state parks, and wildlife management areas. We'd be doing this through active trapping in conjunction with the USDA and the Texas Animal Health Commission, as well as surveillance of animals harvested during our public hunts. Currently, regarding reporting of suspected cases, we're funneling all calls and concerns to our local TPWD Wildlife Division biologists. whether these calls come from the general public or other divisions like state parks or law enforcement. Once those calls come into our TPW biologists, they will then facilitate the larva collection and shipment of those samples in conjunction with the Texas Animal Health Commission. TPWD will continue to train TPWD biologists, game wardens, and state park staff across Texas on New World screwworm background, sampling procedures, and submission of suspected New World screwworm larvae for identification. We will continue to work with our partner agencies and be a resource for landowners, ranch managers, and hunters in Texas. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to APHIS now. I will direct y'all's attention to the screen, okay? Chair calls, or we have you registered as Dr. Mike Watson of the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, APHIS, testifying on the subject, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Please proceed.
And I have my colleague here, Mr. Chris Needham, as well. You've heard a lot today about the pests and the activities that we and our partners are doing. So for USDA and for APHIS, this is certainly a high priority for us. You've heard a lot about the concerns with animal movements in Texas and how that's exacerbating the spread of the pest. You've heard a lot about the challenges we've had working with Mexico. And so from the APHIS or USDA perspective, we are putting a lot of time and effort meeting with our counterparts in Mexico on a regular basis. The critical piece right now is to really work with them as closely as possible to get a handle on the animal movement piece. We realize that's challenging in some parts of the country, but we're really, without that piece being solved, it's going to be very difficult to prevent the fly from moving further north and potentially encouraging and getting into the United States. So we're working that piece very hard, making sure that we're pushing Mexico as hard as possible to control the animal movement. You've heard about the fly drops, the 100 million plus flies we're dropping each week, but you also heard about the challenge with the lack of additional flies. And so that's a second piece of the priority for us, is finding a way for us to produce more flies as soon as possible. The Mexico facility is quite a bit out. If we were to build one in the United States, it would be quite a few years away as well. But at the same time, we're looking at this response as a multi-year response, 7, maybe 10 years, looking at the previous eradication efforts, 50 years ago. This is going to take a long time for us to push it down out of Mexico and back down, hopefully to Darien Gap in the future. So, we want to make sure that while we're trying to prevent it from coming into the United States, be prepared if it does come into the United States, we want to make sure that we're prepared for the long-term effort, and that is, again, to push it as far south as possible back down into the Darien Gap. A third component that I just want to mention is that we're trying to work as closely as possible with states. So we appreciate our colleagues, Commissioner Miller, Dr. Denges, and their staffs in terms of our working closely with them, ensuring that we are as prepared as possible if the fly was to get into the United States. We're also working with folks in Arizona and New Mexico as well to make sure we have as many trained eyes and ears on the ground for what's happening, so that we are aware of what's out there and we can respond as appropriately as possible. Right now, we're relying upon Mexico quite a bit in terms of where the fly is located, where they're detecting the fly, by placing the traps that have been mentioned today on the U.S. side of the border, but also, more importantly, on the Mexican side of the border. That will allow us to have a better feel for where the fly exists, and whether or not the information we're getting from Mexico is accurate. So that's a critical piece we've been working closely with Mexico on, and we expect to start placing traps on the Mexican side of the border here very soon. And our goal is to work, from the border of the United States further south, so that we can, again, identify where that barrier is right now, where the flies exist, so we can do our best to try to maintain some buffer zone away from the United States. As Mr. Miller mentioned, and Dr. Denges mentioned, 360 miles from Texas is a bit worrisome for us. And as we continue to see animal movement, both cattle or wildlife, obviously that poses a greater risk for us as those movements continue. So a fourth piece that I did want to mention is that we are working closely with Mexico to help them develop a team of wildlife biologists who can look at wild animals as well. We've been focusing on cattle to this point, but wildlife might be as big of a risk as any. So we want to make sure that Mexico is doing the best they can to surveil wild animals. So that in addition to the traps, in addition to the cattle inspections, hopefully, again, we can get a good handle on where things lie with that. Again, I think Dr. Miller, I'm sorry, Commissioner Miller mentioned we do have the ports closed. We do have a protocol at the ports that we feel does not pose a risk for cattle to move across the border, right? So if we reopen the border at some point in time, the protocol that's there really is intended to prevent cattle from bringing the fly across the border. So that really isn't the biggest concern for us. It is really what's happening in Mexico. Again, wildlife, animal movements that get closer and closer to the U.S. border and allow the fly to move across the border in that respect. So I don't want to repeat what all the other folks have mentioned this morning. I just want to give you an idea of 3 or 4 of the things that we're really focusing on right now. Intense discussion with Mexico. We have a team, as mentioned, we have a team down there again this week. We'll continue sending folks down on a regular basis. And this is to both work with Mexico to identify ways to control the challenges we're facing, but also having some eyes and ears on the ground in Mexico so we can really see what's happening in real time and confirm that what we're hearing is accurate. So I hope that helps. Mr. Needham, anything you want to add?
No, sir. I'm here. If any questions come in, happy to help.
Okay. I'll go ahead and start. Thank you all. First of all, just to better understand, the way I understand it is there's a couple of places south of Texas somewhere where there's flies being released, sterile flies. Is that y'all doing it, or is it in conjunction with somebody else?
So COPEG is the commission, U.S. Panama Commission that produces the flies, and we're using those flies produced by COPEG to drop in Mexico. We are paying for those activities. So while there are flies produced in Panama, we are using them in Mexico, and U.S. is paying for the cost of those dispersals.
And so they're produced in Panama and they're released in Mexico.
Correct. They're flown from Panama to Mexico at the dispersal center, as mentioned, in Tuxtla right now, and they're released in the areas right now we have concerns where flies or wild-type flies exist.
And so they're being released in 2 different locations?
They're being released. We can share with you a updated chart of where they're being released. They're released just north of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, which you heard, and we're also releasing it on the eastern side of Mexico, where that most recent find was in Veracruz. So that's the find that was 360 miles south of the Texas border. So we've adjusted a little bit to make sure we're dropping where that fly was found a few weeks ago.
Okay, and I heard earlier something about, I think we're probably releasing somewhere between 110 million flies per week?
Correct.
And 170 million flies per week, something in that range. And perhaps we're needing 400 million flies per week. Can you expand on that?
Sure. Right now, we're releasing about 110 per week, correct. The challenge is for us, we were really focused on the Isthmus of Tehuantepec in Mexico because it's the narrowest part of the country. As the fly continues to move further north, the number of flies we have become more diluted and less effective. So the need for additional flies is really focused on the amount of land mass we're going to have to cover as the fly continues to move north. If we looking back at historical numbers, when we had to remove the fly from the United States through Mexico, the numbers were 400 or 500 million that were needed to help push the fly back further south. So those estimates around 500 million, maybe 600 million, are based upon historical numbers that we used back in the 1950s and 60s.
And so, but do we not have the capacity to produce that many flies?
The only production facility currently operating is the one in Panama, which can only produce 100 million per week or so.
And so that brings us to this facility that we're starting in McAllen or Mission. Are they going to produce flies there, or what is the plan for that?
That is simply a dispersal center. So we would fly the flies from Panama up to Texas in order to disperse them within the United States. So that's simply a dispersal center. The production is only occurring right now in Panama.
And so is there any hope for an increase in production?
We are currently assessing the potential to build a domestic facility here in the United States. I believe a lot of folks in industry in the States believe that's a necessary tool to have at our disposal. Right now, we are not aware of anyone else who is building a facility other than the Mexico facility, which is being renovated. So we would need a significant increase in flies to attack the problem that we're facing here moving forward.
And so there's talk about there being one done here in the United States by y'all's agency or by who?
Yeah, USDA is assessing the potential to build a facility here in the United States. Correct.
And so what's the time frame for something like that?
If we were to start tomorrow, it would probably be, as mentioned, 2 to 3 years. The longer it takes for us to get to a point where we can be able to confirm we're able to build one, the longer it's going to take for us to have one up and running.
Members, any other questions? Yes, Representative McLaughlin.
So, question I have, it seemed like we got a wake-up call, a warning call in 2016 and 2017 in Florida, but it seems like we didn't do anything to prepare for it. And you're telling me we were 2 to 3 years to develop a facility. I mean, this will be devastating on our state in Texas, but once it hits us, there's nothing to stop it from going nationwide. And so this, to me, should be one of our number one and one of your number one priorities of anything that we're facing is this, because the monetary value and the devastation this will do to farmers, ranchers across the country is there. So, I mean, what are we doing to cut the red tape to make this move faster, or what we need to do? Because as we all know, and I hate to say it being sitting on this side of the deal, government moves way too slow to get things done sometimes.
I agree with you, sir. This is definitely our highest priority, and it has been now for a number of months. And as I said, we're trying to work with Mexico in hopes of preventing from reaching the United States. But obviously, there's a lot of opinions around the fact that that's not really possible. So we're trying to prepare as best as possible, but we will need additional tools. I can say one thing I did not mention is that we are working closely with FDA and EPA, as others have mentioned, to identify some additional treatment tools that could be used. We're also, and I can ask Mr. Needham to share here, we're meeting with companies. You heard someone mention that we had listening sessions. We have 4 listening sessions, and the goal of that was to hear from the industry in terms of what technologies are out there that might allow us to produce flies sooner. The challenge with producing a lot of flies, the 200, 300 million number, you need a lot of space. It's just impossible to do so without a lot of space. But we're looking at potential options where maybe we can have a small increase in the flies in the interim before we're able to produce an overall facility. Chris, anything you want to mention about that in terms of what we've heard?
No, I think that's exactly right. Like Dr. Watson said, we had a series of 4 listening sessions where we heard from members of the industry, as well as academic universities, and some folks out there who had some products that we wanted to look at. So I think that's really the goal here, is we want to find something that possibly could be scalable, or exploring technologies and ways that we can sort of ramp up that production. There's always a lot of talk about the technology we can use to sterilize the insects. But as Dr. Watson said, really it's that production number that is the key goal here. And how do we get that production up and running as quickly as possible? It really is a high priority for us. But we want to do it in a way that kind of leverages the technology that exists out there, and certainly is sort of adaptable to the situation we face.
Hey, and the place that's producing them in Panama, they don't have the ability to expand quicker than we're able to get something up and running here?
We've heard that question quite a bit. Unfortunately, that facility is fairly old. And so one of our concerns right now is that it is an old facility, and we worry about it at some point not being available for us. But any potential for expanding that would risk its ability to continue to produce for us. So we're a little bit leery about touching the one facility that works for us right now without risking us losing that ability to produce moving forward.
And is there no other facility in the world that does this or can do this?
I believe there may be a facility in South America somewhere, but nothing that is producing the numbers that we need. And one thing we've done here in the U.S. is that we've asked industry, we've asked universities, we've asked everyone we could think of, and if anybody here has other ideas, please let us know. But we've looked at converting an existing facility into a screwworm facility, and so far we've come up empty on that request. No one has been able to identify a facility that we could convert quickly for a production facility.
And so, talk to us a little bit about where you're at in the process of putting up a facility here in the United States or in Texas. Has it been appropriated? Are we not even that far yet? How would that work?
Correct. It has not. We're not that far yet at all. No, we are seeking. We're seeking. I'm not sure how to best to say this. We're seeking a pathway forward to be able to produce a facility at this point in time.
And so, how much money are we talking about to produce a facility to just start from scratch?
Right. I heard. I think Dr. Den just mentioned maybe 350 to 600 million. We've also heard estimates up to about 750 to 800 million. So it's somewhere between that 300 and 800 million amount. And it really depends upon how many flies you want to produce. I think another thing that we heard this afternoon, was about the technology that produces males only. So if we were able to produce males only, double the production number, it might reduce the need for the size of the facility. But right now, if we're looking at 200 or 300 million, the estimates are upwards of 600, 700, 800 million dollars.
And could we give that technology to the folks in Panama to, I guess, streamline whatever they're doing there? Or how would that work?
That's certainly something. So it goes back to what Mr. Needham mentioned. We're working with industry. What we don't want to do is take away what Panama is producing right now. So if we were to introduce something new to Panama, it would take away from that 100 million we're producing every week. What we need right now are some test opportunities, whether it's in Panama or somewhere else in Central America, where we could use some of the new technologies, test those new technologies out, make sure the flies are actually working the way they should work. And that way we could be sure, if we were to change over, that what we're doing is not going to hurt us from reducing the current number of flies we're able to produce.
Okay, so I guess let's talk about animal movement. So you talked a little bit about that, and we all did, but obviously we're worried about how Mexico is handling it, and it's coming further and further. I guess whatever we've done so far hasn't really worked. Is there something that we need to do to make sure that we slow this down as best as possible that we're not doing already?
Yes, so we're seeing some really good response from Sonora and Chihuahua. So in those two states, we feel like they have a good system in place to at least reduce, if not prevent, movement of potentially infested cattle. It's the eastern side of the country where the challenge really lies. And what we're seeing is a lot of cattle moving in from Guatemala. In fact, we heard from the folks in Mexico, there's probably 250 crossings from Guatemala into Mexico. And that's the really big part of the challenge. And so to answer your question, sir, other parts of the government, the State Department and other parts of the government are seeking to engage with countries in Central America to see if we can take it from that angle and see if we can get some help with other countries to prevent those cattle from even approaching Mexico. Realizing that Mexico is having trouble preventing movement within the state and within the country itself, we're hoping that we can maybe prevent some of those cattle from moving into Mexico to begin with. Other than that, there's a big challenge, obviously, with safety on the eastern side of the country, and that really makes it difficult for the Mexican government as well as anyone else to really prevent that cattle movement from happening.
So what about products? You mentioned a little bit about products that we could use for treatment if we're in a situation where the fly is here and we've got to treat animals. Where are we on that?
Yeah, so you heard that there's some tools that could be used off-label, and we've heard that from our FDA colleagues as well. And we've also heard that our FDA colleagues are prepared to be able to respond if the fly was to enter the United States. They could use emergency authority to be able to ensure that these treatments are available. So there's confidence at FDA and at EPA that if we were to need these products, they would be available. But it will take time. They won't, because of the way the process works. My understanding is that it's easier to wait until the fly's here and make a decision really quickly, as opposed to having the manufacturers go through the longer extended process to register.
But what,
with that,
but
sorry,
what
go
would
ahead.
it look like? I mean, what would they be able to do? Would they save animals, or, I mean,
Yeah,
to what degree would they be effective?
Yes, and I can ask Dr. Denges to correct me if I'm wrong here, please, sir. But so ivermectin, for example, is a larvicide. It would, I mean, it's a injectable that would kill the larvae inside the animal. So it would prevent any further damage being done once it's injected into the animal. There's external sprays that could be done as well on the animals that could help treat as well. Treating the wounds is actually critical, so the animal can heal as quickly as possible. So there's tools to help the animal heal, but also tools to help kill the larvae that are inside the animal as well.
Y'all jump in whenever y'all want.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
we have two things this go around that we didn't have previously to battle the screwworm fly. One I've already mentioned would be a bait that would take out the screwworm fly. Second is ivermectin and Dectomax were not available back in the 1960s. I've got a request in. What we need, the animal health, the Parks and Wildlife Department mentioned that we have 500 head of deer. It's a little hard to rope and doctor deer, so we need an alternative. So of that 5 million, a little over 1 million of them are under high fence. So I have got a request in to have ivermectin being as an emergency measure to use as a feed ingredient. So if we could feed that, and all of those deer under high fence get fed, so we can immediately protect those high fence deer and a lot of the low fence deer. The problem is, and Representative McLaughlin mentioned it, we moved at the speed of government. That has to be approved by the FDA. So there are some outside entities petitioning the FDA to add ivermectin. It's going to take forever. They're understaffed, and the staff that they have there are new, so it's not going to happen very quick. We don't need it today because we don't have a screwworm here, but we don't want to wait till we get it here to get it approved. So what I've done, the USDA has a standing agreement already to use ivermectin as a feed ingredient in the fever tick program. They've been doing that for 16 years. So what I've asked Brooke Rollins to do, Secretary of USDA, is just ask for an amendment to the existing agreement to add 2 words. And as legislators, y'all understand this is the easiest way to get your bill passed. It's the easiest way to get the ivermectin is after the word fever tick, add and screwworms. So if they can amend that agreement, we're good to go. A couple of more points on the fly traps. We keep out those med fly traps year round down on the board. We work hand in hand with APHIS. Now, out of due respect to them, that med fly trap is the attractant is a pheromone that attracts the Mediterranean fruit fly to that trap. The screwworm doesn't find that very sexy. It doesn't attract them at all. So the only way a screwworm fly is going to hit on that trap is it just fall out of the sky and land on it. So they're ineffective, 100% ineffective. So that's why we came up with this Swarm Lure 5, that's something that will actually attract the screwworm fly. So I'm working with APHIS. I think we can get them lined out and get them some good traps down. The problem is, if you're checking those traps, and I've got my guys are checking to see if there's screwworm flies in the med traps. We hadn't found any. We're not going to find any because they're not attracted to them. Use this lure that will actually attract them. So we get a false positive. We may actually have screwworm flies, but if we're just using that med fly trap, they're not in it, so we wouldn't know if they were here or not. So we need to correct that. And then my colleague at the Animal Health Department mentioned that they were having a training, I believe, on screwworm identification, named off 7 or 8 entities that are going to be there for that training. TDA was absent from that list, and respectfully, I'd ask that we be added to that list so my personnel could also be trained. This is part of the problem, that there's a disconnect between the agencies, and we really should try to work together, because I think we all want to get rid of this screwworm problem. Other than that, one more thing on the bait is it only attracts screwworm flies and blowflies, which both of them dead are just fine. It doesn't attract honeybees, bumblebees, monarch butterflies. It's not detrimental to the environment.
So this bait will kill them.
Yes.
And so if I remember correctly, when in dealing over the years and dealing with ticks, one of the problems we had was that we put out something to address them, but we didn't put out enough. And it actually developed a string of fever ticks that were immune to whatever we were putting out, because we put that out, they ate a little bit of it, and then they just kind of adapted to it. I'm concerned that we're headed in that same direction, particularly when you have, for example, with the deer population in Texas, where you have 5 million deer, 1 million that's under high fence. I assume, getting to those 1 million will be a lot easier than getting to the other 4 million. And so how are we going to attack that?
So we have a MOU with the Texas Parks and Wildlife and USDA to use ivermectin treated corn in the fever tick eradication areas, systematic areas, to battle the cattle fever tick. And we monitor the consumption of that corn on a weekly basis, and we monitor the tick for any resistance that they're building up to that ivermectin on a regular basis. So we monitor that really close. So that's what we do. It might be difficult to monitor any resistance that's built up if you're just treating the feed and dumping it out here to the wildlife, native wildlife, and hoping they're coming up and eating the proper amount. So that's where you would run into some resistance issues.
But so talk about with, this bait and how it would work.
I don't know enough. Dr. Kaufman may know about the bait. I know there was some bait that they, I guess, produced and used back in the 60s and 70s, but I think the EPA has taken some of that off of the market.
I see. So before he addresses
Yes, sir.
that, are you saying that you're not sure we have anything to kill the screwworms once they get here?
No, we do. There are, the doramectin is a product that provides 21, as research I've seen, is 21 days of protective efficacy. Like we've said, it's not labeled for use for treatment of screwworms in this country, but emergency approval, it could be used.
And how would you get it out there?
Well, you'd have to treat the individual animal with it on a recurring basis. So you run into, potential of withdrawal and residue issues.
And so you would treat animals with it and dipping bats and stuff
No,
like that,
you
or
run
how
it down
do
a
you?
chute and inject them with it.
It's
That's
injectable.
for doramectin. But there are other products that they use in South America that are topical applications of medication that are approved for use in screwworms in South America, that I believe some drug companies are looking to get those approved here in the United States.
And so how do you use those on wildlife?
There's, as far as the wildlife treatment, it's going to be hard to treat other than captive or pen-raised deer. You could potentially treat those, but as far as the native wildlife population, it'd be pretty hard.
And so if we get to that stage, how's it paid? Who pays for it? How does that work?
That's a good question. We're trying to work that out with the USDA. I do not know if it will be some sort of cooperative agreement that they will pay for. Perhaps Administrator Watson could answer that question. I know we're scheduled to meet with them and look into this a little closer, but right now it's my understanding a lot of that burden may be on the producer to treat these animals.
Okay, well, let's talk about this bait.
Sure, we can talk about both.
All right, okay.
So the baits, like you said, will bring in all the different blowflies. So understand there are way more other blowflies than there are screwworms in any population. So if you run a trap like that it kills them is great, but it's gonna be massive numbers of them, and if you're gonna have to sort through those to find the screwworms, to know that they're there, you need to understand that going in, because the other blowflies way outnumber the screwworms. Even though they cause a lot of cases, they're actually relatively rare compared to other types of insects like houseflies or the other blowflies. And the USDA has a very good swarm lure, but it is not specific to the screwworm. The other aspect of baits and other types of trapping like they were talking about is once you start releasing the sterile males, you have to stop with those others because it's just as attractive to those released, very expensive screwworms that you're releasing as it is to any wild screwworm, unless it's a female-only one, which would be wonderful. So keep that in mind that it's a pre-strategy. It's a, you have cases in this area. You want to try and get rid of as many as you can before you start releasing the sterile males. But once those releases start, the trapping has to stop. With respect to the ivermectin and some of the other mectin products, so the ivermectin is the only one that has a feed additive label. And that's really meant for swine and other animals, not cattle. It's had a special approval to be used in the fever tick eradication zone, targeting white-tailed deer. But I want to make sure you understand a couple of points from that is that the fever tick is a blood-feeding tick. It gets on that animal when it is an extremely tiny, tiny tick, and then it stays on that animal through all of its stages. So when you're treating toxicities in the dose, so if you think of a dose you give a child versus an adult, the same thing applies to an ivermectin type product. And so we don't have a lot of great data on these ivermectin type products as screwworm products, right? They're used in South America, but a lot of the testing there is, call it coincidental, right? We were testing this and we didn't see screwworms. It's very, as you might imagine, having heard what you heard about this fly today, it's very, very difficult to do testing on that fly. Who actually wants to create a wound and have these flies on a living animal? We can't do it in a laboratory. And so a lot of the studies are not provative, or it's kind of correlated. And so we can't use doramectin, can't be fed to the animals. And so that's a problem with trying to get that out there. And the other aspect is that we have a whole bunch of wildlife that don't eat corn or don't eat baited feed. Now it certainly can drop, if it works, it could drop the population of the flies, but overall you're going to have a whole bunch of wildlife that have no interest in that corn and that are also just as susceptible to this fly. There's a lot to be considered, and the last is anytime you're feeding ivermectin, doramectin, any of those products, they have what's called a withdrawal period. And so in cattle, it's a 56-day withdrawal period, which is one of the reasons they stop feeding the corn to the deer in late July, I believe, so that by the time hunting season opens, those deer are safe to eat. So if in fact it is decided to go forward with a feed additive product, you need to be very careful with what the withdrawal periods and whether hunting seasons might be allowed or other types of things are going to be allowed because these products do persist. The reason they work is that they're distributed throughout the body, and that includes all the parts that we might eat.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you all very much for coming. I don't know exactly who all these, I have a few questions and I don't know who's the right person to direct it to, so I'm just going to ask it to all of y'all. Back in the 60s, 50s, when we were eradicating this previously, did we only have the one facility in Panama, or was there multiple facilities in those times? We had one here, and so we lost that facility during that time. And did we eradicate it throughout all of Mexico? I mean, where did the screwworm exist at the point, in the mid-20th century when we decided we needed to get rid of this thing?
So I can address some of it. So the screwworm is native, right? It's called the New World. It's not new, it's the New World.
Sure.
Right? So it's a tropical fly that it makes incursions into temperate areas as the climate allows it to, and then it dies back in the wintertime. So when, there are records going back to when the conquistadors arrived, some of the things they describe demonstrate that it was very well established here at that time. So when we started the eradication program, they started in Florida in the 1950s and then did some demonstrations down in the Caribbean and then decided to eradicate Florida in the late 1950s, early 1960s, and were very, very successful in that. They then switched to they call it the Southwest program, so it obviously started with Texas but included New Mexico and Arizona, and very quickly knocked it back in about 4 or 5 years. And then at that point, we had the barrier in South Texas, kind of like the fever tick now, but incursions kept happening, right? The fly gets moved around and can move itself to a certain degree. And after repeated years of having incursions in lots of cases, the case was made to work with Mexico to eradicate it. And it wasn't all of Mexico at first. They had certain stop points, right? Where it currently is now is one of those stop points. They decided it was working so well, they moved further south and made agreements with Central American countries and eventually chose the Darien Gap because it was an impenetrable forest at the time and there was no cattle production. It was the narrowest part of North and South America. One of my colleagues that's worked in this program for a very long time said, just keep in mind that what took us 17 years to eradicate this fly returned in 2. So it's very adept at getting back north when conditions allow.
So it was mentioned a little bit earlier that there's a little bit of reticence or a little bit of issues with Mexico not being cooperative, not allowing us to have a hangar or be able to land planes, and that is improved. Could you just talk a little bit about that? Because it seems like, to me, we're in a very different stage in 2025 in terms of international relations with Mexico and the government of Mexico being a legitimate government and not just a cartel facade. And that's kind of where we're at. How much of that is a kind of a failure of foreign relations, and how much of it you think we're going to be able to actually work with them and get something real done? Is it plausible to get all of Mexico eradicated again, given, yeah, go for it.
I would ask Aegis.
Okay, yeah, y'all at the feds might be better to ask about that.
Sure. I mean, there were certainly hiccups in terms of us getting a place to have a dispersal center, landing rights in the country, those kind of things. Most of those have been resolved. We're still having challenges getting a hangar at our current dispersal center. We've gotten some assurances from folks in Mexico that will happen. It'll take a little bit longer than we expected. But through the spring, that did hinder our ability to get the planes up and drop as many flies as we needed to. But for the most part, that issue has been resolved, and we're dropping about 100 to 110 million flies a week at this point in time. And we are having so I meet regularly with my counterpart at Seneca. There's a technical working group that meets on a regular basis as well, weekly. As I mentioned, we have folks down there in Mexico now. Again, this is the 6th group that's gone down in the last month and a half or so. So things have gotten better. The challenge is, we need to help Mexico do some things, and that's what we're trying to do right now, is identify what those needs are, whether it's additional staffing, additional tools. Without our help, they're not going to be able to do it themselves. So this is where we're at this point in time, where we're trying to do our best to make sure they have as many resources as possible to help themselves. Again, the biggest challenge is going to be that cattle movement piece, which I think is going to be the issue that I'm not sure that Mexico's going to be able to solve alone.
And I think you'd mentioned a little bit ago that there was this possibility of taking this fruit fly facility and convert it to being able. Is that, how tractable is that? What's the time frame on something like that being able to be accomplished?
This is the one in Mexico?
Yes.
So that is happening. We have actually provided about $21 million to Mexico. My understanding is the renovation of the facility has started, but again, as Commissioner Miller mentioned, it's going to take 12 to 18 months before that facility's up and running. But it has the renovation has started already in that facility.
And do you have a projection of how many flies per week or whatever it'll be able to produce?
Currently, they're saying between 50 and 100.
Okay. So that kind of closes the gap by 50% of where we are. We're 100 million, we need 400 million, and that gets us to about 300 million.
It was helped tremendously, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And then the last question I have is, you mentioned new insecticides, and I'm no expert on this. I had a pesticide license for years that I kept up with, and I took this great agri-life extension classes and learned a lot about the state of the art there. And the thing I kept hearing is that we really haven't gotten anything really new approved by the feds in terms of new herbicides or new insecticides, pesticides, because they're very reticent to approve new things. This is a really profound problem. Is there going to be an accelerated plan to be able to get some of these products that are yet to be developed that we theorize could be out there? Could we get them approved in a matter of months instead of a matter of decades?
Fortunately, both EPA and FDA have emergency use authority. So if there's a product that has enough data that shows that it's relatively safe, those agencies can approve those products. Again, we're working very closely with both agencies to identify what might be available. I know that folks in Texas are doing the same thing, other states as well. I think, as you mentioned, the challenge is going to be in assuring the manufacturers that there, one, will be approval, and two, there'll be enough need that they're willing to commit to producing the level of product that we would need, the amount of product we would need.
Thank you.
Hey, but just to clarify, Panama is producing 110 million. This Mexican facility it would put us somewhere at 170 million to 200 and a little over 200 million.
Correct.
Which is somewhere between a third and a half of what we need,
It's
potentially.
around 40%, yeah, between 40 and 50% of what we would need. Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
All right. Representative Lopez?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm part of the South Texas area, and we have a large acreage with ranching communities. We have the stocking rate for cattle at 1 animal unit per 2.5 acres, where in other areas in Texas, it's 35 acres for 1 unit. And so this is deeply concerning, and as I hear that you have some data that you're using to assess what the needs are for us here in Texas, and you're saying that you're using the data from Florida, what's been done in the past. On the research that I did, I looked up the Florida ranching community and the numbers, the data, and it shows that they have 1.7 million, whereas in Texas, we have 11 million, 11.8. So these numbers are deeply concerning because we're going to need a lot more than what Florida had. And but I'm thankful, for TDA, Texas Health Commission, on all the efforts that are doing, the ivermectin, the baits, all of that is very, very important. I'm an hour south of Mission, and I would love to go see the facility that you have in Mission and see the work that's being done as well. And again, I'm thankful to all the work that's being done, but I know that there's much needed as well.
Right.
I got one more.
So Representative McLaughlin.
And maybe you answered earlier and I didn't catch it, but what are we doing to build a facility in our own country that will take care of our own needs and quit relying on countries outside of here? Are we gonna do that domestically? Whether we have to send them to Mexico or we have to send them somewhere else. But I grew up along the border. If you count on Mexico for everything, you got a big thing coming, I'm telling you. They don't move at the speed of lightning there. And this is something that I don't understand why we ever quit producing them anyway, even if we eradicated it here, if they were still in the world. We try to save the world every time we turn around. Why aren't we sending flies all over the country if that's what we need to do? So, but I haven't heard an answer yet. Are we gonna build a facility in our own country? Texas, put them in a van and send them up to the East Coast or Washington D.C. and let y'all have a problem up there before we finally get it resolved. Because to us, this is our livelihood. A lot of people, this is our livelihood, and this will be devastating to us. And it seems like we're moving at snail pace instead of warp speed, and this is something that should be at warp speed. And then my next question is to all of you. I would like, as a committee member up here on the Ag Committee, to know that each and every one of you are going to communicate and coordinate with each other so that we're not having meetings where one group's having a meeting over here and another group's having a meeting over there, that we coordinate and y'all all be on the same page, because a house divided will not succeed.
Chairman Kitzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to ask you a question, and I'm sure nobody wants to answer it. We keep talking about, where it is, and it's getting closer, and we want to be as prepared as we can when it gets to Texas. So one, I take away from that, it's inevitable that it's coming to Texas. And two, my question is, when's it gonna be here? What is the estimated time of arrival for the New World screwworm to return to Texas? And somehow I'm betting that's less than 18 months. I'll bet you a Dr. Pepper if you want it. When's it coming? Somebody can answer that.
I'm hesitant to make that.
I would imagine so. That's a terrible answer, by the way, and I don't want to be disrespectful to any of you. You're in a bind trying to solve the problem. But you can't tell me this is a top priority when we won't give these producers or the citizens of Texas any idea when it's going to be here. But we can watch the map and see how it's been progressing, and we know that we say that, you know, it's going to progress even faster. And the only time of any relief is going to be maybe 18 months from now, and that's only going to be half of what we need. That doesn't add up. I realize I'm an Aggie and I only got 10 fingers, but you know this is a threat.
So, yeah.
We've got to get the rest of the people to understand that it's a threat. I guarantee you that if we had a storm in the Gulf that was going to do multiple billions of dollars worth of damage, and we could spend $800 million and stop all that, prevent it, we'd do that right now. But we've got more than a storm in the Gulf approaching the border of Texas with these screwworms. And in spite of all y'all's best efforts, and I'm not knocking that one bit, somebody up above better get more serious about what this really means. And our production agriculture commissioner, you know those folks can't handle this thing. This is not the 1960s, and the pressure on production agriculture is already enormous. And I'd like somebody today to tell me what happens the day after they discover the screwworm in Texas. What does that do to our cattle industry? And I'm not talking about animals dying. I'm talking about what happens to the production side and to the producers and their ability to make a living anymore, much less feed Americans and take care of the rest of the world and their food supply. So I'm thanking y'all for the work you're doing, and I'm not trying to pick on the Fed too hard, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say this reintroduction to Texas is a lot closer than 18 months, and I want somebody to prove me wrong on that.
Representative Kitzman, I'll attempt to answer your question.
Yes, sir.
As best I can. In November, the first case was 1,100 miles from Texas. Today, it's 350 miles from Texas, so it travels 750 miles in 7 months. So at that rate, it'll be here in 3.5 months. Damage to Texas is estimated, once it's here, our livestock industry, somewhere between 18 and 20 billion dollars is the cost of the industry once it gets here and we're fully engaged in repelling it. So neither one of those are what you wanted to hear, but that's the best estimate I can give you. It's moving pretty fast.
Yes, sir.
It moves 750 miles in 7 months.
Well, thank you for trying to reply.
Representative Money.
I have I'd like some specificity on the facility that we're trying to decide whether or not to build, and I think you said it would take 3 years. I don't understand. Explain what kind of facility we're talking about. What kind of specifications does it need in order to be effective as far as size and building materials and all that? Paint a picture for what kind of facility this is.
Let me can I interject on that before the AFIS hits? So right now, there is no facility, there's no plans, there's no engineering. It's a thought by Representative Tony Gonzalez. He's trying to file a bill. There's been no hearing. It hasn't been passed. It's just talk. We've got to have a facility. So working in the Senate, John Cornyn and Cruz are working with Representative Tony Gonzalez to form some kind of bill to get an appropriations of somewhere between, you've heard, $600 and $800 million to build this facility. But there's no plan, there's no engineering. It had been talk of putting it at Moore Air Force Base in South Texas. They do want to build it in Texas, but that's the only sure thing that I've heard. So just and then
Okay.
APHIS can go off and give you the finer details.
Tell us what that 600 to 800 million looks like.
For APHIS, I'm sorry.
Yes.
For APHIS?
Yes, please.
So we're basing that on the facility we have in Panama. That's our best guess. And that facility is about 200,000 square feet of actual production with some additional square footage, maybe 230, 240,000 square feet total for 100 million flies per week. Obviously, it's a little bit older technology. There might not be the most efficient use of space there, but we're talking about a very, very large facility. A lot of conversations around how we sterilize the flies. The sterilization of the flies is very small, but the production is what takes most of the space. You need lots of water, lots of electricity. It produces a pretty horrible smell, so it's not a great facility to have in a community. Those kind of things. So, if we were to extrapolate 200,000 square feet at 100 million flies, hopefully have some efficiency gains over the years with technology, those kind of things. Maybe it's 2.5, 3 times as much for 300 million flies, or twice as much for 200 million flies. We don't know exactly, but we're just basing it upon what we know in Panama at this point in time.
Is there not, and I know there's no appropriation or plan or whatever, but is this different than just a tilt wall concrete building that we could find in any kind of industrial park anywhere in Texas?
Well, it requires biosafety level 2 for one. So you need the biosafety level 2 containment, plus again, the heavy water and electrical usage. And like I mentioned earlier, we have asked everyone we could think of about if there's any facility existing in the United States that we could convert to this facility. And the answer we've received from everyone, industry, stakeholders, public, everybody we talked to, they all said no. There's nothing like that in the United States that could be converted easily.
And there was one back in the 60s or 70s.
Your mic's not on.
There was a facility years ago, I think. What happened to that facility? Is it new development, or what did it turn into?
Chris, help me out here. I believe that facility was.
Yeah, I think I was going to say, I believe you're talking about the Mission, Texas facility, which was part of the initial eradication effort that went on into the 80s. And I think what happened is that when the Copeg facility in Panama came online, the decision was made at that time to sort of decommission that. So I don't think it's even I don't even know if the building still exists. But either way, I don't believe it's in a spot where that's anything we could sort of readily use for anything, even if it does exist, just because it's been so long.
There was a facility in Mexico that produced 500 million flies a week back in the 70s. 76, they opened that facility up. I think the U.S. provided 80% of the funding for that facility. And just for a historic perspective, as far as Mexico not being a willing participant, I look back in the commission minutes from the 70s. They said that facility opened in 76. And the Mexican government was not going to allow them to use the landing strip that was adjacent to the facility, that they were going to require the U.S. government to go down the road 50 or 60 miles. And oh, by the way, you're going to have to build another landing strip. And then when you get that built, and you're going to need to register the planes with the Mexican government, and we're going to need Mexican pilots to fly those planes. And if that's not going to happen, we're going to put an armed military person in the cockpit with that pilot, just to make sure they don't fly over restricted airspace. So going back 50 years, Mexico hasn't been a very willing participant with all this.
Look, I think what you're saying kind of goes towards my question, which is we're hearing an estimation of how many flies we may need weekly. Does that assume that nothing gets worse over these next few years? That if we have a projection that we need 500 million flies a week, and we won't have that online for 2 years, it seems to assume that nothing breaks through our barrier between now and then. And no one's done this yet. Thank you, Chairman Guillen, for convening this. I've heard from a lot of folks at home, and just many knowing that I care about this issue. They've been asking us to do that, so I'm glad we're here. The solution seems really simple. If any media is wanting to write a story on this, it sounds like a really simple thing. We need to irradiate some flies, make some sterile males. It sounds a lot easier. I'm just concerned we're not telling the whole story. I mean, be honest with us, guys. Tell us how really, really bad this is, how dire it is, and whether we need to make our own solution to it.
It depends on how widespread the problem gets here.
Give us some hype
United
ups.
States, we had 200 million flies produced at our southern border back in the 70s, and New Mexico and Arizona were having issues with infestations. And it was, you know, they were having issues trying to get flies to Arizona to fight their infestation. So it just depends on how widespread it gets. That's why they were wanting to try to stop it at the Isthmus of Tehuantepec there with the 100 million flies. That was going to be our best chance to stop it. You know, Mexico's widening out as you get north of there, so the 100 million's not going to, unfortunately, do the trick.
So the other thing to keep in mind is, you know, in the 50s and 60s, cattle producers and sheep producers, they're all well aware of this fly, and they altered when they did certain practices to their animals, when they birthed, when they castrated, when they dehorned. We don't have to worry about any of that right now, and so people are going to have to, if it shows up, understand that some of these management practices are going to have to change, or they're going to exacerbate not only the overall problem, but the challenges they have on their own ranches. And so understand that, you know, AgriLife is working on this, Animal Health and other groups are working on what does this look like if this fly gets closer, and how do we educate producers, right? Many of our producers, like me, I wasn't here when that fly was as big of a problem as it was. And so you don't have that understanding of what it is, and people are gonna have to understand. So we're doing these education things ahead of time, building the plans, should the fly arrive. But it is going to take some compromises on the other side, as well as people here understanding that when Animal Health Commission puts in a quarantine, that quarantine is honored, right? This fly is not the tick that crawls off and is just on that range. This is a fly that's got wings, and so people have to be willing to overall work together on solving this problem.
Representative Hopper.
Yeah, so you mentioned a little bit ago, I think someone talked about the climate that this fly prefers, that, you know, prior to the eradication in the 60s, that it was in Arizona, it was in Texas. Did it really move into the broader North America? It was kind of...
So, and Dr. Dingus has a lot of the records from where it went, but it certainly went up into Oklahoma. Again, a lot of this was people moving animals. The fly itself will go 12 miles a day, and I tell people it's like you being hungry and going to a McDonald's. You're only going to go to the next one. If they find a place to stop, they're going to stop. But people loading animals in trailers and driving them 200 miles is what moves this fly those great distances. So it did move north every summer, and then it would, when the cold weather comes in, it falls back south. So it is a tropical fly that doesn't do well in cold weather. It does like higher humidities, which is why the part of Mexico that it just moved into makes it more precarious. There are constraints, and so when they do sterile fly releases, these guys are excellent at it. It's all computer driven and habitat driven, and know where the cases are, and they meter out the flies according to what the need is in the area. The challenge is that when the need gets bigger than the density of flies that they want to drop in an area, then you're losing coverage. And that's where, you know, you get into West Texas, it may not require as many flies because the animal units are much lower per acre. And so a lot of that research has already been done, but it comes down to capacity and the number of flies we have.
I see. So when we were eradicated the first time, though, we probably weren't dropping flies in Nebraska. I mean, it was pretty much a southern U.S., Mexico.
So far as I recall, I'm sorry.
Yeah, as far as you know. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I also want to drill in because I think there's probably a lot of people in this room that have been taking ivermectin every day, you know what I mean, or at least once a week or whatever since COVID. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know. It just seems to not kill us. So I was wondering, you mentioned a minute ago that, you know, there was some concern about having ivermectin or those mectin type products that, you know, having to have the animal weaned off for a good amount of time before you would slaughter them because people would eat the animal and they'd have some ivermectin. And I was just wondering, like, drilling into that from a, you know, using ivermectin prophylactically in animals, does it really have a negative consequence? Do we know there's a negative consequence? If we just tell people, hey, listen, like, you're going to eat this beef and there's going to be a little ivermectin in it, like a lot of people were taking that anyways. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, to the extent that I am not a toxicologist in
me
that manner, a mammalian toxicologist, but it Right, so part of the challenge with having, when you dose a cow with it, you know how much you're giving them. And those studies have been done to show how much is there at X date after the treatment. When you lay it out in corn or in feed and you're feeding wildlife, you don't know how much, right? They try and measure how much an animal might consume, but a white-tailed deer may consume more or less than an axis, than a nilgai, whatever the animal is that might eat it, and therefore the dose that is in there, as well as that animal's ability to metabolize that product, is unknown, and that's the risk. It's not that it's inherently toxic to us, right? We're mammals the same as cows, but it's how much you're taking in, and then whether there are people who are sensitive to it in the population that also need to be aware of that.
It just seems like it would be a very simple thing for a small producer to be able to just know, hey, listen, I'm going to give all my animals some ivermectin. They're not going to get this infection, and so I just wanted to drill into that a little bit and see is it really that big of a risk if you're giving it as a required dosage, and then you say, okay, well, I'm going to slaughter this animal, and then maybe it has a little ivermectin in it. I think a lot of folks might not care.
Right. So one, doing so is breaking the law, right? So it's illegal, the label is the law. But secondly is recognizing that you may treat that animal today and maybe you get 3 weeks of coverage. So, but you can't sell that animal for 8 weeks. So now are you gonna retreat it at week 3 to get that coverage back up? Well, now you're adding a dose on top of an existing dose. And so it may compound the issue. And then, again, it may cause unforeseen circumstances in the animals themselves as well as the individuals who are consuming that.
Those residual and withdrawal times are based on a single dose. And then if you have a repeated dose over a period of time, then that's where you run into issues with residues and withdrawal times that hadn't been calculated. So that's where the problem lies.
Andy, where it comes in real handy is if a stockman is working his cattle, let's say he's going to dehorn and castrate and ear tag, well, and it's the fly season, well, he can inject them with ivermectin, and that protects them for 3 weeks. Well, they're healed up. So that's a great advantage to do that. Sheep men that are castrating or docking sheep can give them a shot of ivermectin, and it gets them down the road 2 or 3 weeks, they're probably healed up. So it is a great advantage to use it. And if you're doing young animals like that, you don't have to worry about a withdrawal period because they're nowhere near market age. Just thought I'd throw that in. Yeah.
Representative DeRazio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have just 2 questions. You were talking about a Bio-2 facility. What do you compare a Bio-2 facility to? Is it a hospital? Is it a silicon computer chip manufacturer type facility?
I don't see APHIS answering, so I'll try. So it's a biocontainment level 2. It really is an arthropod containment level 2+, and that essentially means it's negative pressure. So if you open the door, air comes in, so nothing goes out. You have to keep in mind that this fly has no idea where you're growing it. And if you don't have these containment features placed, you open the door and flies go out. Now they're in wherever area you're growing them, and they are not necessarily sterilized. And so that's why we have these facilities that are structured that way, right? So if you're growing 100 million flies, how many getting out are tolerable that aren't sterilized, right? Because there's a population in that facility that's not sterilized. And so those levels are in there, right? An example is that a lot of the facilities are shower out, right? Because you don't want a fly landing on your clothes, and so you have to strip and redress, take a shower and redress to leave some of these facilities. I don't know if that's the case across Copeg down there. So those levels are built in. That's why a lot of these facilities can't be retrofit. Just the big box stores and facilities you see around. It's just they weren't built for that, and that gets into it as well as all the obnoxious odors, dangerous odors for people too, right? Ammonia and other things as well. And so there's a lot of infrastructure that goes into the construction of these, which is why you see that very high price.
Okay, and so it sounds like it's basically the ventilation.
Well,
air
ventilation,
conditioning.
drainage, right? You don't want them going down the drain and popping out in a, outside the facility. I can't speak to all of the aspects of it, but it's how people and supplies go in and out. How do you get the waste out of a facility like that? You have to make sure that, right, when you grow these in this vat of nasty stuff, right, you get the pupae out, but not necessarily everything in there turned into a larva that crawled out. You may still have some living organisms in there. So they have to be able to kill that material that you've been growing all these fly maggots in. There's a lot that goes into it. And then they mentioned the high volume of water. So I believe the numbers are for the Copeg facility, about 125,000 gallons of water a day to rear 100 million flies. The waste of the feeding product is considerable, and it's very difficult to get rid of that. Now they're looking at ways of doing that to improve that. You're likely going to have to build a water recycling facility when you build a plant like this, and that may be factored into some of these costs. And the other aspect is that when Copeg essentially has every part to everything in that facility is duplicated, right? So if some fan goes down, they have the ability to go and immediately replace that, not wait 6 weeks for the product to be delivered. And so there's a lot of infrastructure that has to be put into place in a facility like this as well.
Representative Wharton.
Yeah, the only question I was thinking of was if we don't have a fly facility in Texas, can the fly be imported from Panama?
Yes, sir. That's what the dispersal center and Moorfield is going to be used as. They're going to fly the production up to that facility and store it there, and we can disperse it as needed. And I've been told by USDA that we will have all that production at our disposal. So,
All right, before we go on to the next panel, one last question. What do we need to do? Do we need to call on the governor to add something to the special session? Are we calling on Congress to do something? What is it that we need to do? Commissioner?
I reached out towards the end of the last regular session, even before we knew that we were going to have a special session, to Speaker Burrows and Governor Dan Patrick, and asked them to put the screwworm topic on the interim charge. So it is on the interim charge. So we'll have from now until the next legislative session to figure out what the House and the Senate wants to do on this. But y'all got a pretty good start on it today. You've got a good background. I think you understand the situation now, its limitations, and where we need to go with it. So from my end of it, I'm probably going to need some FTEs to add more fly trappers. Probably going to need some appropriations to buy more fly traps. That wasn't in my appropriation request this last time. So I do have enough money in my biosecurity budget to buy enough fly traps to get us through probably to the next session, but I don't have enough FTEs to deploy them on. So, like that.
Anybody else, please?
we need a sterile fly production facility here domestically that we can use and have at our disposal. Animal Health Commission, we have a plan that we can put in place tomorrow if it gets here. Due to the fact that we don't have sterile flies and how large the outbreak gets, it may overwhelm us pretty quick. But we're going to do our darndest to stop it in its place. And we're going to need to control movements of animals. Anything that needs to move needs to be inspected, treated, identified, and have the proper documentation. So we're going to have to do surveillance in and around that area to make sure that the flies are not moving, or make sure we know where they are. So, but the big issue is that we do not have a sterile fly production facility here domestically that we control and have the production at our use.
So is that something that the state of Texas can do?
And it's $350 to $800 million That I do not know. It's a, it's a big ask.
I mean, has anybody talked, are we talking to the federal government about, you know, providing a down payment or something to encourage them to move on it quicker?
We have not. We might, our industry partners that are gonna be in the next few panels may be able to answer that, but we have not had those direct conversations with USDA.
Representative Money?
We understand the cost, I think, a little bit. Can you talk about the timeline? I just intuitively believe that Texas could do this more quickly than the feds could do it. And it sounds like they've got to go through more things. If we were able to get this on the call and appropriate some money, how long would it take to engineer the facility, build it, and get it up and running?
I have not looked at that timeline, but I would say you could probably cut it in half for what the federal government could do it in.
And who would be in charge of building, you know, site acquisition, building, and putting it together?
I don't know if we could put that.
Be the Texas
under-
Facility Commission
Yeah,
would be in charge of
Facility
that.
Okay. And making sure that it meets all the specifications and requirements that are needed in order for it to be an effective state-of-the-art facility.
I'm
Would
sure
that
we'd
be-
have to bring in the USDA to have the their folks look at it and inspect it and certify that it is a BSL-2 facility and that could be used in that capacity.
So what I would say is, money is a simple problem. It's not easy, but it's simple.
Yes,
We either have the money or we don't. We allocate it or we don't. Having a plan that we're ready to execute, you know, is vital to this, because we don't even know how much money we need until we get to that. So
Right.
what does it take to get us moving to the point where either the congressman or us knows what we're even shooting for?
We've asked that question, what would it take? They have a hard time comparing because they say that, well, we use Panamanian contractors and Panamanian labor as far as that goes. They've got the blueprints and the plans and all that, I'm fairly certain, for the COPEG facility in Panama. I'm sure it wouldn't take much for engineers and architects and those folks to look at that and recreate something like that here.
Okay.
Dr. Watson, what is it that Texas can do to help move this along quicker and to make sure we address this situation the way it should be addressed?
That's a hard question to answer, honestly. Just given, you know, my role, honestly, that's just a little bit difficult to answer. I do think that any support that you all can provide around increasing support for a facility is really helpful, right? I think that's, you know, we do need additional flies, that's without a doubt. And so I think I will just leave it at that any way that we can move forward with the ability to produce additional flies is going to be helpful to all of us who are on this call right now.
Dr. Kaufman, you have something to say?
Yeah, so just keep in mind as going through this, that this is still a foreign animal disease pest, and USDA APHIS will have to be an integral partner in running a plant like this. And it, you know, Moorfield is the one place that they have identified. That doesn't necessarily mean it couldn't be somewhere else that Texas identifies, but APHIS will still have to be a major partner in that for us to have the fly.
Right. So what you're saying is we can't just go about it on our own. We'd have to have some kind of agreement with the federal government as we go forward if we wanted to pursue something like that.
That's my understanding of how it would have to work.
Yeah. Members, any other questions? Panelists, anything else to add before we move on? Well, we appreciate y'all being here, appreciate your insight, And thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Chair now calls the second panel. Warren Cude of the Texas Farm Bureau, Stephen Dybel, Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association, Heath Grigg, King Ranch, Josh Weingarner, Texas Cattle Feeders Association. Mr. Cude, we have you registered as Warren Cude, representing the Texas Farm Bureau. You're the state director for District 6, and you're here testifying on this subject. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Please proceed.
Well, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Warren Cood. I ranch in the Trans-Pecos region of West Texas, and I also have the honor of serving on the Texas Farm Bureau State Board for District 6. I'm here today not just as a board member, but as someone who lives and works on the land every day, someone who's been firsthand how fragile livestock and livelihoods can be in the face of disease and pest. But there's a lot of moving parts on a ranch every day. It takes a lot of manpower. For screwworms will be another demand for the labor each day. Unfortunately, there are not enough cowboys to get the work done, and we need to focus on ways to expand the impact on each person on the ranch. Another growing challenge in Texas is the large amounts of recreational land with absentee landowners and no daily management, especially true for West and South Texas. These properties hold a large population of wildlife that will be served as home for screwworms, and we won't know until they spill over into our neighboring properties. That means community outreach will become more important as infestation are found. We managed to wipe out screwworms back in the 1960s using the sterile fly techniques, but it never went away completely. It's still active in parts of South America and the Caribbean, and now it's creeping back north. Over 3,800 cases have been reported in Mexico, just 350 miles from our border. If the pest crosses into Texas, the consequences will be catastrophic, not only for ranchers like me, but for the entire U.S. livestock industry. We're talking about billions in losses, untold suffering for animals, and a major blow to the rural economies. We're grateful to Secretary Rollins and the USDA for stepping up with the 5-point response plan, including the sterile fly dispersal facility, but dispersal alone won't solve the problem. We need a domestic production facility capable of producing enough sterile flies every week to push this pest back where it came from. Therefore, Texas Farm Bureau is strongly urging swift approval of at least $300 million in USDA emergency funds to be utilized for the domestic facility. We recognize the agency has been working diligently to achieve this goal. However, the federal government continues to delay. We believe Texas must be prepared to step in, potentially through cost-share approach to protect our livestock, our economy, our consumers, and the way of life. We're already behind in constructing this production facility and cannot afford any further delays. While we build production facilities, we need coordination among regulatories, farmers, and ranchers, and parasite experts to create strategies and tools that mitigate the impact on livestock production and wildlife populations. We are lucky to have the best available to lead these efforts here in Texas: Animal Health Commission, Texas AgriLife, and Texas Parks and Wildlife. With that said, we also appreciate the governor's leadership in directing the Texas Animal Health Commission and Texas Parks and Wildlife to coordinate a response team. That's a good start, but we need the committee some more support to keep the momentum going, both in securing federal funding and, if necessary, exploring state-level solutions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members, for holding this hearing and giving the issue attention it deserves. We appreciate your time, your leadership, and your commitment to protecting Texas agriculture.
Thank you, sir. We have you registered as Stephen Dybel. First Vice President representing Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association.
Yes, sir.
Testifying on the subject, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Please
Bet.
continue.
Chairman Ginn and members of the committee, thank you for the invitation and opportunity to speak today on this important issue. My name is Stephen Diebel, and I serve as First Vice President of the Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association, or TSCRA, and I'm a lifelong rancher in Victoria. TSCRA is a 148-year-old trade association and the state's oldest and largest livestock association. We represent approximately 28,000 individuals and businesses as members that contribute to the production of beef and the stewardship of our natural resources in Texas and the Southwest. As of today, confirmed cases of New World screwworm have been identified roughly 360 miles south of the U.S.-Mexico border, and cases are continuing to move north. This pest is not a hypothetical threat. It is real and advancing closer to Texas every day. We appreciate that USDA is making plans for a sterile fly dispersal facility in Texas at Moore Airfield Base, and that facility will be essential for getting sterile flies out quickly and efficiently should an outbreak occur in the U.S. However, as Texas Animal Health Commission has already explained to the committee, the facility will not produce additional sterile flies. That makes it critical and an important stopgap, but inadequate to effectively solve this problem. We are desperately short on sterile fly production, as you've heard, and that is the most critical tool in the toolbox to stop this pest. Currently, USDA has not received funding from Congress to build a fly production facility. Moreover, efforts to secure the funds necessary for this facility have been met with challenges in D.C. Funding a sterile fly production facility and other measures associated with combating the screwworm are not wasteful spending. They are targeted, preventative investments in protecting the U.S. and Texas livestock industry and our nation's beef supply, an industry that in 2022 was the top ag commodity in Texas, accounting for $15.5 billion of the state's total agriculture production. Estimates from USDA state that a single outbreak of New World screwworm in Texas could cost our industry $1.8 billion a year, exponentially more than a timely investment in production capacity ever would. And it's important to note that these numbers do not include the economic impact of the pest on wildlife and other sectors. Perhaps no group understands the importance of fiscal responsibility more so than ranchers. We face tough choices every day, but sometimes the cost of prevention up front is the most cost-effective choice in the long run. This is the case here. Compounding the problem is a lack of enforcement and surveillance in Mexico, where screwworm continues to spread in part because of unregulated livestock movement. That movement puts our border and our producers in immediate danger. As producers, we recognize that this is a rapidly evolving situation, but there are still critical gaps in the information we need to prepare effectively. We don't yet know what movement protocols could look like if the pest crosses into Texas, whether there will be restrictions on transporting cattle across county or state lines, or what kinds of inspection or permitting requirements might be put in place. We understand that the FDA and EPA are actively working to approve treatment options, and we appreciate those efforts. But to be ready, we need more clarity on what will be expected of us, so we can begin making plans now to stay in compliance and protect our operations. This situation requires an all-hands-on-deck approach. We ask this committee to begin conversations with our Texas congressional delegation, with USDA leadership, and with federal partners in Washington to determine what role the state of Texas can play in helping scale up sterile fly production or remove of federal bottlenecks. In the weeks ahead, you will be hearing from our association and its members on possible avenues for the state to help with funding sterile fly production and other proactive efforts to protect Texas livestock. Because inaction is not an option. This issue is urgent enough that our association helped spearhead the creation of the Texas Screwworm Coalition, which includes not only our organization, but 11 other associations. Some are represented here today. Together, we're working to educate, coordinate, and prepare, but we cannot do this alone. This pest does not recognize fences or borders. If we wait, we lose. We respectfully ask this committee to continue prioritizing this issue and to work with us because protecting Texas livestock is going to take all of us. Thank you for your time and your service. Also, if you are interested in looking at the website, Texas Screwworm Coalition's website, it is screwwormtx.org, and I'm happy to answer any questions that later on.
Thank you. We now have you registered as Heath Grigg, representing the King Ranch. You're the Vice President, General, and GM of Ranching and Wildlife Operations. And you're here to testify on the subject, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Please.
Good afternoon, Chairman Guillen and members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation and opportunity to testify today. My name is Heath Grigg, and I am the Vice President and General Manager of Ranching, Wildlife, and Farming Operations for King Ranch, located in South Texas. I also serve on the Board of Directors and as Chairman of the Parasites Subcommittee for the Texas Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association, as well as serving on the Board of Directors for both the Texas Cattle Feeders Association and Texas Wildlife Association. I'm here to speak from a producer level about the threat that New World Screwworm poses to Texas ranches, especially in South Texas, as we will be on the front lines if this pest enters the U.S. from Mexico. I want to be clear up front, though. It does not matter whether you run 5 head or 20,000 head of cattle. This pest has the potential to drastically impact the entire cattle industry in Texas. As someone managing a large-scale operation, I'm already concerned about what this could mean for us. And if we're concerned, I can promise you that the smaller family-run operations that make up the backbone of Texas ranching and TSCRA are going to feel the impact even more, and the increased costs that will accompany this fight will pose a larger rate of impact to operating budgets for smaller producers than to ranches operating on a larger scale. If the New World Screwworm reaches Texas, here's some perspective and some of the steps that King Ranch and ranchers across the state will need to consider to protect their herd and livelihood. Intensive inspection protocols. Every animal will need to be inspected regularly, especially around any wounds, branding sites, dehorning, castration, and even simple scratches. This will require significantly more labor. King Ranch employs 1 cowboy per 800 head of cattle, which is far less than the number of cowboys we had during the screwworm outbreak of the 50s and 60s. We are a profit-oriented company, and running lean and efficient is necessary to achieve positive margins. We'll likely need to bring more employees just to manage increased monitoring and care, and finding cowboys and labor to fill these new positions will be a challenge. There'll be delayed or altered management practices. Procedures like branding, ear tagging, and other necessary but invasive practices may need to be delayed to cooler months when the fly is less active, or performed differently altogether to reduce the risk. This has a domino effect on everything from sale timing, herd management, and income loss through market discounts. It means fewer calves and less beef, which is a loss of revenue for the state. Let me add that a reduction of supply will potentially result in a negative impact to beef demand through higher prices. This can in turn create additional impact on producers as the beef market turns bearish. I would also like to add that purebred operators will have to go to extra measures and endure additional cost to preserve genetics that they've been building, such as our genetics that we've been building for the past 175 years. Movement protocols. If screwworms are found in Texas, producers will need to implement movement restrictions, which can mean not rotating pastures, potentially causing the degradation of natural resources. This affects not just the economics of ranching, but also the health of our herds, rangelands, and wildlife. Movement restrictions will also prohibit the sale and replacement of cattle in the downstream production cycle, putting additional pressure on stocker operations and the cattle feeding industry, which are already facing increased challenges. Veterinarian treatment costs. The cost of treating infested animals is not just the medicine or the vet visit. It's lost performance, reduced weight gains, in some cases, loss of the animal altogether. One case of screwworm can turn into many cases in a short amount of time. I'm asked by our shareholders sometimes, what does worst case look like? That can be infinite to the point of losing a herd. But to put it in perspective, what a non-worst case scenarios will look like for us is if a New World screwworm resulted in a 20% reduction in calf crop, the financial impact would be an increase of production cost of 25 to 30%, assuming sunk cost is fully realized. Hunting revenue at risk. Hunting leases and commercial hunting represent one of our most significant sources of income. Landowners across Texas, especially in rural areas, depend on the seasonal revenue to help cover cost, property taxes, to feed and fuel. If New World screwworm establishes itself here, that entire stream could be extremely reduced. Remember, we cannot gather and treat our wildlife populations. The ripple effect of losing our hunting and outdoor recreation revenue would be felt not just at the ranch level, but across all local economy, from gas stations to feed stores to rural tax bases. The Texas Wildlife Association will speak in greater detail about the wildlife impacts, but I want to stress this isn't just a cattle problem. For a ranch like ours, even a small outbreak could cost us 7 figures in prevention, treatment, and lost productivity. We are currently creating internal plans and building our inventory of feed and medicine. We're also assessing what systems need to be employed to allow for sufficient surveillance. King Ranch has 2 calving seasons, which would require cowboys to ride through calving cows daily to survey newborn calves. Conducting this on pasture sizes ranging from 4,000 to 30,000 acres would be impossible. Issues of this sort will be a struggle for all producers. Again, I want to stress, if we are having to make contingency plans and changes to our standard operating procedures, how do we expect smaller operations to manage this when many of them do not have access to full-time labor? How does a young rancher trying to get started to survey and treat their whole herd or lose half of it? The economic ripple could affect could reach every rural community in Texas, many of which are already struggling. Think of the areas that the ranching and outdoor recreation touch in our local communities. Our involvement in the cattle industry does not stop at the ranch. King Ranch is vertically integrated with significant investment in the cattle feeding industry. The health of the industry and every link of the production chain is important to all involved in the industry. Those in the feeding industry are feeling the pain right now with the lowest supply of cattle we have seen in 74 years and the closure of the Mexico border to a feeder calf supply of over 1 million head annually. The threat that New World screwworm puts on domestic movement and supply could be the last straw for some feed yards and force them to go out of business. King Ranch is proud to be a part of the Texas cattle and wildlife industries, and we take our responsibilities seriously when it comes to animal health and biosecurity. But this is a threat that requires swift coordination and support from federal agencies, state agencies, animal health officials, and lawmakers like yourselves. As others have said today, I strongly urge the committee and the legislature as a whole to explore proactive measures, especially when looking at funding emergency response planning and making sure our Texas Animal Health Commission and Texas Parks and Wildlife Department have the resource to act fast if the screwworm crosses our border. Waiting until it's here is too late. Thank you for your time and for your commitment to Texas ranchers and wildlife managers, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. We have you registered as Josh Weingarner, Texas Cattle Feeders Association, here to testify on the subject. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Please continue.
So my name is Josh Weingarner, the Director of Government Relations for Texas Cattle Feeders Association. Texas Cattle Feeders Association represents feed yards in Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico, and then cattle feeders throughout the country. Our members feed about 6 million head of cattle a year. And of that 6 million head, about 15% of that is Mexican cattle that have crossed over the Mexican border onto South Texas ranches where they're grown, and then they end up in our feed yards where they're finished. Those cattle are also predominantly now U.S. genetically based. So as a seed stock producer, like Heath mentioned, my family and I raise registered Angus cattle. Seed stock producers have shipped cattle to those northern states of Mexico and have really increased the quality of the herd there, and for the very reason that those are exporting states to the U.S. They really have more in common with us than they do with the rest of Mexico. In fact, They choose us because we can provide them more value than the packers and the feeders in Mexico can. So when we've talked thus far today about the potential ramifications, and they are significant, it is a serious issue. We're already seeing, though, the implications of the screwworm in the U.S. because of the border closure. And as APHIS noted in their presentation, we can safely cross cattle under the export protocol that was established by APHIS and ensure that we don't get screwworms through that process. It's the other cattle that may be illegally imported or wildlife that are the issue when it comes to crossing the U.S. border. But the closure of the U.S.-Mexican border was a political maneuver to try to leverage Mexico to respond. Unfortunately, the allies that we have in those northern Mexican states are also the ones that are feeling the pinch from this issue right now. They're the ones helping us try to get Mexico City to take responsibility, to take action, and to take this issue seriously and stop the movement of the Central American cattle across the southern border of Mexico up into the north. And as was mentioned in other testimonies, that's the real issue here. We're not talking about a biblical plague of flies swarming in Mexico today. I think there are some that in the general public that believe that, but what we're talking about is onesies and twosies that are hitching a ride on some sort of animal, whether it be cattle or sheep or a human, and they're moving. And there were a lot of, Dr. Dinges did a great job of explaining how some of this movement has taken place. It could be from the people movement that we saw. It could be from illegally moving cattle through different parts without being inspected, parts of Mexico without being inspected. But that is the real issue. So one of the other significant things that has come out of the fact that we're in a historic drought, as Heath has mentioned, we haven't started building back our herd. The smallest number of cattle in the U.S. that we've ever had. We've now reduced that even more by closing our border. And we're running the risk of now jeopardizing another packing plant. If you look at the numbers of cattle that the Mexican cattle trade equates to, that's essentially the same amount of cattle throughput that a packing plant would take in a year. They're already, again, as we mentioned, we've got a short supply. They're struggling to make any money. This is a great excuse for them to decide, hey, we don't have the numbers, we're just going to close one of our plants, which there are only 4 big packers left in the U.S. There are some regional packers, which we're lucky enough to have one of those, or a couple of those in Texas. One that specifically focuses on fed cattle, the others that do it sometime. And as I mentioned, Texas is first in cattle feeding. We're third in packing plant capacity. So if one of these packing plants closes here, that puts us at a different economic standpoint than we are today. It may end up being a northern plant. We don't know, but my reason I'm mentioning this is one of the other things that the potential out there from the if we don't get this fly taken care of and we don't get our border back open, we're not going to see the herd rebuilding that we're hoping for because of the fly. We're not going to see additional cattle coming in and doing our normal import of those good genetically sound cattle from Mexico into Texas ranches and Texas feed yards. So if we don't do that, then long term, we're looking at the potential for a potential closure of a packing plant. One of the other things I want to address real quick, when we talked about the potential for federal funding for a plant, today the Secretary could use and has made a request for authorization to use money out of the Animal Health Protection Act, which that gives her the authority to ask for money out of the CCC, the Commodity Credit Corp. But OMB is the one that has not, the Office of Management and Budget has to authorize that, and they have to this point not authorized it because we've heard different reasoning. They're wanting to keep some money in reserve, but we're also hearing that they don't know that this is a serious enough issue. So when asked about what we can do, more pressure on OMB and the Trump administration would obviously be helpful. As also was mentioned, our congressional delegation is doing a great job. Monica De La Cruz, Tony Gonzalez, Senator Cornyn, Senator Cruz, they're all engaged on this. Representative Cuellar and others are also engaged on this and really making this known. We also have a lot of support from other states like Florida. Some of their delegation has also been engaged on this process. So we are in continuous conversation with the federal government, our state government partners, Animal Health Commission, Wildlife Association. Our industry groups are on multiple calls a week talking about this, planning things, how can we address these situations, and trying to build out more information. The other, real quick, just a couple of other things to address some comments that were made. The fly traps themselves, they're great at surveillance, but they're not a solution to stopping the fly. They're not going to catch enough to stop it, but they're good to tell us where they are and where we can drop the flies to address them, or where more treatment needs to take place. And then I want to mention that throughout the entire time that Mexico had the sterile fly, that had previously when Mexico was endemic with the screwworm, we were still importing cattle from Mexico safely. And the only time that the border was closed for us in Mexico was during FMD for about 7 years back in the 50s. So that was the real takeaways. We can do this safely, and it actually becomes a surveillance tool, right? If we're doing it right, we should never see that screwworm show up at the border port. If we're doing it wrong and something's not working, then they will show up. So we'll know that and can address that with more resources as necessary. So it was mentioned several times that we eradicated the New World screwworm in the 1960s, and that is true. But the last incident of a screwworm in the United States prior to the Florida incursion, which occurred in 2017, was 1982. So even though we eradicated it, we still operated with the fact that it was showing up at hot spots that needed to be addressed. And as we're talking through this and making our plan for long term, I think that's one thing to keep in mind, is that we can get a handle on this, and when we're talking about the timeline, it may take us a long time to do it, but it may be that we're just dealing with certain spots. We're not dealing with, it's covered up over a certain geographic territory. It may just be single spots that we're having to really hone in on, and like hot shots addressing a fire. That's what we may have to do. So thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. You mentioned the Agriculture Secretary has a request in, I guess, for use of money that's in a certain account or in a certain program, and it hasn't been approved. What's the money for, and how much is it? And is it enough, or is it?
Well, they have requested the ability to use funds out of the Commodity Credit Corp. I don't know that they've asked for a specific amount, but they've asked for authorization to draw that down under the Animal Health Protection Act authority.
And is the assumption that they could get enough money to bring a facility like we talked about earlier up and running, within the next few years? Is that?
I think that was the initial request, was to build the facility. We need the money to do this. So it's been in the works for a while. So that's one of the reasons I mentioned that, is that we're not just sitting on our hands from the industry level or from the federal government level. We've been working on this for a number of years, as Dr. Den just mentioned. And then this past November really ramped up and started to work through what are our potential solutions here. How can we rectify this issue? And this is one of them. So the request has gone in. It follows the $21 million that's already been approved to go to Mexico for that plant. And it is my understanding that because of that investment in the Mexican plant, plus the investment obviously into the COPEG plant that's been mentioned in Panama, we have access to those flies once they're produced to use in the United States. So, and that's important to note. It was asked earlier why we don't have a production facility in the United States. It's really because it was out of sight, out of mind. We had addressed the situation. And then it's, do we continue to spend the money on something as an insurance when we don't have a problem? And I think there was a political mentality that why spend the money today for something that doesn't exist? And we've had to fight to keep the money even to continue the COPEG plant. That's a USDA funded facility, partially funded facility. But at different times throughout that funding has been jeopardized by people saying, this is not a big deal, we don't have it in the United States, we don't need to continue to do this production.
No, no. Members, any questions? Yeah, Chairman Kitzman?
I want to thank y'all for being here. Back during the session towards the end, Texas and Southwest Cattle Raisers, along with Farm Bureau and some others, had asked for some funding from the state to try to kickstart this thing. Are y'all still in the belief that that may be a wise investment for the state of Texas to partner with the feds, or are we going to trust the federal government to handle it all? What y'all's feeling on that today?
You know, from a personal perspective, I think it's going to be imperative that the state of Texas step in. I think not only from a timing perspective, but also from a partnership perspective. Let's remember, we have the cost of building the facility, but we also have the cost of running the facility. And I think that's been overlooked a little bit today. The $300 to $500 million is talked about building it, but there's a tremendous amount of resources that it takes to operate and manage it too. So, you know, that's going to certainly weigh in on where this takes place. Having that labor source, having those electricity needs, those water needs, and I think, you know, that mission facility checks those boxes. But for sure, I do believe the state of Texas is going to have to take a major leadership role in this.
You know, one of the things we enjoy in today's world is a safe food supply in the United States of America. Certainly, y'all deal with controlling animal diseases and making sure that when you ship something to the people that are going to process those animals, that those animals are in good enough health to be safe for our domestic food supply, as well as anybody else around the world that gets an American contribution to their sustenance. But to go back a little bit, what do we think this is going to do to our everyday producers out there? I mean, you know, most of the people that I know that are in production agriculture have a job doing something else, and then they take care of their cows in the evening and on the weekends. Then you do have those absentee landowners that really don't have a lot to do with maintaining those herds either. But for the guy that's just continued his family farm for 100 years and he's trying to keep his cows going, that's still food on people's plates when that goes to the processor. But if this happens, what do we think is going to happen to those people?
Go ahead, Warren. Well, we ranch, still have a family operation out in West Texas, out south of Fort Stockton. So I have a big vested interest in it, the same as the guys and producers from South Texas. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm an hour and a half from the border. Back in the last cases in Pecos County were actually in 1974. So there were still actively fighting in 72 through 74 out Brewster County and Pecos County in that area. My family at that time would have as full time. Well, that labor force is not there anymore. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be up to the family members now, and the one or two full-time help that you have to go do that. And all of you, all of us that ranch understand, you know, we can have the best idea of what we're going to do at 8 o'clock that morning till the phone rings and one of your hands say, hey, you got a well down, or you got a fence down, or whatever, and your whole course of action changes. Where back in the 60s and 70s, there was a bunch of cowboys that were out they were roaming, and they were checking water and they were doing this. So I think that picking up that surveillance happened a lot quicker. back then than what it's going to happen. In my area out in West Texas, we do have a lot of absentee landowners that have come in there, and they're purchasing these ranches to where they can come in on the weekend, or they come out and put out their deer feed, and then you may not see them for another couple months. And to me, that's, back there again, back in the 60s and 70s, all those areas were actively being run with either sheep or cattle or goats. And now they're just a straight hunting operation, so they may not actually know that they have a problem till they show up, a week or two before hunting season. So I think that is a big issue. Going back to your question before that Stephen answered, I don't think, and I think Mr. McLaughlin addressed this earlier, the United States should never, ever be relying on another country to ensure the safety of their agriculture industry, period.
Thank you.
I mean, that should be up to our federal government and our state. When those flies were detected in Mexico, the train had already left the station.
That's right.
And we should have been pouring concrete last year as soon as it was detected. Because the last time the flies were in this area, it was a 34-year ordeal to get them back down to the Darien Gap. So it's going to be an investment for the United States. It's not going to be just a year-long investment. It's going to be my kids and Stephen's kids. It's going to be their problem before you see them pushed back out of Mexico, and that's kind of scary.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, yeah, Representative McLaughlin.
Well, I mean, my biggest concern is it's alarming that we're dependent on third world countries, in my opinion, and there's no plan to build this. I mean, it would just be something to look at, a private-public endeavor, because it's gonna take private money to get it started because the government's gonna move too damn slow.
I think anything and everything is on the table. I think it's interesting to look back over history and understand that it was the Texas producers and the Texas within itself that solved this problem in the beginning. And I think we need to really heavily rely on not only our partnerships from within the state, our producers within the state, our state legislature. So I think anything is on the table, but certainly Texas needs to take the lead on this.
Well, I mean, the figures, and maybe y'all know some of this, but the figures I got while I was here, I mean, you're talking about needing 2 to 3 acre feet of water a day. You're talking about 650 people probably to man the facility, and a level 2 security. I mean, which is doable. I mean, I think there's places, of course, the smell is gonna be bad, but there's places along the border that could accommodate that now, I think, pretty quickly.
Well, and when you have that facility that's already there in Mission, that's really it's already got the security, it's got the water, the electricity, and you're going to have the labor force there. So it makes a lot of sense. Back to your question, the original facility in the 60s was built in 12 months.
Yeah, I think you can build a lot faster than what they said here.
And it was built by a private contractor, but that private contractor was also, and it was built on stakeholder funding also that matched those, I know the Dolph Briscoes and the Gates family, and there was a lot of key players back in that area. But it was built on a record amount of time. It was built by a construction company that had a vested interest because they were also cattle producers. So they wanted to get it done. So I think the key is not to keep the red tape out of it to where you can build a facility.
So I want to I agree completely that we should not be dependent on any third world country or any other country for our food security, right? That should be sacrosanct for us. However, the reason that those facilities were built there is because it was cheaper. It was cheaper to build them. It was faster to build them. The labor was cheaper. All those things fit into why COPEG became what it is today. Plus the fact that we didn't want to do research and didn't want to do other things in the United States that could be done somewhere else. But the reason we don't have one here today is because we had a political philosophy that we didn't need to spend the money on it because it wasn't important at the time. We didn't want to keep it. We had it, but we didn't want to keep it. We wanted somebody else to do it. We chose to say, from a fiscal restraints perspective, which I'm a fiscal conservative myself, but when you look at that, we chose to make that decision that we're going to take the fiscal route and not the safety of our cattle, sheep, goat industry, and protect U.S. agriculture and our own food supply.
But I agree with you there, but I mean, that's why we don't have hindsight, but the economic penalty that we're looking at will make those costs look trivial now.
Absolutely, and I think that's where, this is one of those places where, from a political philosophy kind of thing, this is a real change, that we need to do what we can on all animal diseases, all plant diseases, to make sure that we can control those ourselves and spend what we need to do it.
Representative Lopez.
Thank you all for being here today. This is very important. It's a very important issue, especially because we are already facing the challenges in our production of food because of our drought conditions. And now we have this issue that's going to affect our meat supply. And so as that gets closer to us, if I was thinking about it, like, okay, 380 miles away from the border, that's only 4.5 hours drive. Very close to us. And this is in a city that has almost 1 million people in Veracruz, where it was caught. And I'm thinking about those towns that are underdeveloped, where maybe we don't know that it's there, and they could be closer to us than we really think. And so it's deeply concerning to me, and wanted to ask you too, because we've been talking about cattle, we've been talking about deer, warm-blooded animals. What else is going to be affected besides that?
If I could answer, that's been one of our fears in South Texas, is that this doesn't show up on a cow or a deer or a horse. It shows up in a dog in downtown McAllen, you know, and look at the population you have in the valley, and you know, and what's the awareness, what's the surveillance going on down there, and where do the movement protocols come into place for pets and companion animals? So I do agree with you, and I think that that's a huge risk, and it's a risk. It's hard to monitor those animals.
So our pets will be affected. A lot of people on the border take their pets to Mexico to the vet because it's cheaper. So, you know, even more concerning.
Absolutely. So one of the things that exacerbated the Florida outbreak was that pets showed up at veterinary clinics in Florida, and those veterinarians had never seen a screwworm before, so they didn't know what they were looking at. They didn't know how to deal with it, and that just, it could have been, that surveillance could help them get ahead of that much faster had they been expecting to see those animals. So that's why we've done a lot with the Animal Health Commission and other agencies to push that information out there to veterinarians also. TVMA has also been part of our discussions, making sure that they are giving all the veterinarians within their membership the information on screwworm. The general public has it, so that everybody, the first time we see it, it's going to help us address it more quickly.
Chairman Kinsman.
Thank you, sir. I think I'm good. So thank y'all very much.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions, members? All right.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much for your
y'all.
time.
Thank you. Thank y'all.
Okay, go on to our last panel. Chair calls Jonathan Letts, Texas Wildlife Association, Charles Maley, South Texas Property Rights Association, Madison Bexley, Livestock Marketing Association, and Damon Rogers, representing himself. We'll start with Jonathan Letts. We have you registered as Jonathan Letts, representing the Texas Wildlife Association, testifying on the subject. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Chairman Guillen, members of the committee. My name is Jonathan Letts, and I'm the most recent past president of Texas Wildlife Association, an organization that represents over 7,000 members. And our members represent 35 million acres, or about 28% of the rural lands, working lands in Texas. As you have heard from previous testimony, New World screwworms are a definite threat to livestock. but it is an even greater threat to Texas wildlife. The greatest impact is likely to white-tailed deer. However, other species such as mule deer, javelina, pronghorn, turkey, bighorn sheep, and numerous other species are certainly susceptible. White-tailed deer hunting alone has an annual economic impact to Texas of $9.6 billion. Let me repeat that. White-tailed deer hunting alone has an annual economic impact to Texas of $9.6 billion. And I want to make one note here because of a lot of times we're testifying on certain deer issues, Texas Wildlife Association. This is not a wild deer versus a deer breeder issue at all here. This is a white-tailed deer and other wildlife issue. This disease will greatly impact all white-tailed deer, those in the wild, those in pens, those in high fence, those in low fence. In addition to native wildlife, the exotic wildlife industry is estimated to have add an additional $2 billion annual economic impact to Texas. And I have not heard the exotic industry even mentioned today. And that is much like the wildlife industry, or the wildlife. You cannot go out and catch these animals, the exotics. So that's going to be a huge potential impact. The hunting industry employs tens of thousands of jobs. This is critical to the state of Texas. I grew up in an era when New World screwworms were a significant problem. I spent my summers and other free times catching newborn calves and treating their navel with medicine and bone oil to prevent New World screwworms infestation. It is a gruesome disease to see these maggots eating live flesh of animals. In livestock, and especially with wildlife, it is the newborn animals that are the most susceptible, right after birth, while the navel is still moist and healing. And I want to emphasize that we've talked a lot about, or heard about, the ivermectin and other possible treatments. You will never be able to treat newborn animals. They will not have the ivermectin or anything else. The only way you're going to eradicate and stop the spread is through the sterilization program that we've already talked about. And white-tailed deer also do have an increased risk when they're shedding their velvet or in the fighting during the rut. With livestock, New World screwworms can be treated, though many will certainly still die. With wildlife and most exotic species, New World screwworms will mean the death once infected. A quick look at the numbers. In 1960, it was estimated there were about 1.5 to 2 million white-tailed deer in Texas. As the eradication of New World screwworms took hold, by 1975, there was about 3 million white-tailed deer in Texas. By 1990, that population had climbed to 5.5 million deer and has remained relatively constant since then. While one cannot say that this increase is totally due to the eradication of New World screwworms in the mid-70s, it is clearly a significant factor. Improved conservation, land stewardship efforts, and an increased value of hunting to landowners are also important factors. Hunting is a critical source of revenue to help ranching families supplement their incomes. Whether the ranches raise livestock or not, it is still an important source of revenue. For many ranches, hunting now makes up the majority of the revenue and is critical to sustain their operations. This revenue helps sustain rural Texas. The return of New World screwworms to Texas would be devastating to rural Texas and to all of Texas, in fact. We know the solution. Releasing sterilized New World screwworm flies stop the disease once, and it will stop the disease again. This is the answer that needs to be pursued. We cannot afford to wait. We need to have action now. Thank you for your time.
All right. Charles Maley, we have you registered as Charles Maley, representing South Texas Property Rights Association, testifying on the subject. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Are we approaching evening? No, we're not evening yet, are we? Good afternoon, Chairman and Committee. Chairman Guillen, thank you for this opportunity to get the background and the input for the committee and for this state necessary to approach this problem from all the angles that we need to solve, obviously, a most critical issue. Every panelist that's been up here has laid that groundwork. I'm not going to replow that ground. As a South Texas organization, obviously our members are on the front line of this issue as it potentially impacts our country. We do have some members that are already being negatively impacted as Josh from Cattle Feeders has talked about, a lot of the Mexico cattle that come into this country, that supply has been shut off. A number of our members, that is their livelihood. They background those cattle. They import them, they background them, they get them ready for the feed yards and ship them north. That business is totally shut down at the present time. So it's already negatively impacting producers in South Texas at this point, to the point that it's literally their entire livelihood that's shut down already. So sooner rather than later, we need to come up with solutions. Representative Kitzman, you mentioned what's it going to take to keep these family ranches going. For those that still have family members that are on the ranch, Jonathan, you just mentioned, it's a lot of work. You got to get up, you got to check cattle, you got to check babies, especially if you're calving out of sync. If you get some babies that are late in the season and in the warmer weather. Some of my first memories are going out at 4 and 5 years old and riding with my dad checking cattle. Thank goodness he had a day job with Texas Farm Bureau, with Texas Farm Bureau, that allowed him to both have a job to support his family and the opportunity to be back at the ranch and check cattle on a daily, if not every couple of day basis. So it's a lot of work. And I think Heath from King Ranch mentioned that additional cost may be as much as 25% for an ongoing operation that's already got cowboys out there in the field. For those family ranches, it's going to be adding a whole other person that doesn't even exist. It's not about increasing by a percentage. It's literally doubling perhaps or tripling, finding somebody that doesn't even exist right now. Representative Lopez, you mentioned something about what other species might be affected. Well, one of those species is humans, and one of the things that hasn't been accounted for is that in the 50s and 60s, the people right here in this town, the people that are living on the street today were not on the street in the 50s and 60s. Those people that are on the street don't get the medical attention that they always need. They don't get those sores and rubs and burns, etc., don't get addressed in a timely fashion. And especially in the valley, you get New World screwworm this side of the river, and you're going to find that it's in our human population as well. Now, probably not as devastating, because at some point those people will interact with an agency or somebody will hopefully intervene on their behalf, but it'll end up in the human population as well. So it's something we need to address both from an animal, a pet, and a human standpoint, a livestock pet and human standpoint. Yeah. And I want to comment quickly, Jonathan, you mentioned the wildlife, and South Texas is home to some of the best quail hunting in the country. And when a number of our members hear the potential for ivermectin or dormectin, obviously dormectin is not approved for feed use, but was talked about earlier today about using some feed supplements to perhaps combat the New World screwworm. You heard the state vet and scientists talk about that dosing may not be sufficient to take care of those worms or other parasites in those animals, because they may or may not eat enough feed. And when they don't eat enough feed, they actually can create its own resistance. So if you eat small amounts of ivermectin corn or other types of feed, then that creates a resistance. Not only does it create a resistance in the screwworm, but in other of the parasites that we normally use ivermectin and dormectin to treat. So we potentially create an additional problem not only in the screwworm fly, but also in some of the other things that we use ivermectin and dormectin. And so I think that's something that putting it out on the landscape needs to be considered strongly. Currently, there is in place a fever tick use for ivermectin-laced feed, but in those areas, we still, to my knowledge, don't have any extensive studies on what that's doing in those local areas to the plant and bug community, if you will, as to how that might affect the food chain and the habitat of bobwhite quail. And so I think we have to be real careful introducing that conversation of just feeding ivermectin or feeding a pesticide broadly across the state from that standpoint. So just those are some questions that had come up. Representative McLaughlin, Representative Money, you guys brought up how long is it going to take? Why is it taking so long? Why can't we do it ourselves? Why do we have to be reliant on some other country to solve our problem? Why can't Texas solve our problem? When it came to border security, Texas decided not to wait on Washington to act. This state drove border security policy for the nation. Along with the legislature and our governor, we decided to act before Washington acted to solve the problem. With New World Screwworm, this state can do the same thing. One of those solutions, and I'm not going to dwell on it, and if you guys have a desire to go into this, one of those solutions is already on the books here in Texas. One of those opportunities to come up with a Texas-based solution, perhaps a Plan B for battling New World Screwworm. USDA said that they are open to any options. They've had some listening sessions. Perhaps we can come up with a Texas-based solution as well. Chapter 379B here in Texas is the Defense-Based Development Authority. Texas has the first defense base that was closed was Navy Chase in Beeville. That's why the Defense-Based Development Authority was created. Navy Chase has 3 1.5 mile runways. It has water, 1 million gallons a day of water availability. It has power availability. It has land availability. It is not surrounded by bunches and bunches of people, 20, 30, 40,000 homes that might be affected by the smell. The infrastructure is there and would be a great place that the state could potentially start this project. Because of the way the Defense Development Authority is structured, it gives a lot of flexibility to public-private partnerships between the state and private entities and even the federal government. So we potentially could build a facility and allow the federal government to lease that back in a way that would take care of South Texas producers and the New World Screwworm issue in a much shorter time frame, maybe cut off 18 months to 2 years and come up with a Texas-based solution that's already on the books right now. And so, again, throwing that out there, that is a potential Plan B. I know that some of us within the industry, some of our friends within the industry are concerned that if we pose a Plan B, then Plan A doesn't get any movement. Maybe we need to focus just on a Plan A, but I think a Plan A and a Plan B, I think a number of you have suggested a Plan B, and I think Texas can participate in a Plan B, and that vehicle is sitting there right in front of us, perhaps. And so I think that if y'all have any interest in that, that's something that we could pursue.
All right. Let's go on to, and we'll go to questions in a little bit. Let's go on to Madison Bexley. We have you registered as Madison Bexley, representing the Livestock Marketing Association, testifying on the subject. Is that correct?
Yes, Livestock Marketing Association of Texas.
Livestock Marketing Association of Texas, and we have your permission to fix that.
Yes, sir.
All right, there we go.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'd like to first thank Chair Guillen and the committee for holding the hearing on this critical issue. My name is Madison Bexley, and I'm the co-owner and operator of Lockhart Auction, a livestock auction about 30 minutes south of here. We have an auction every Thursday where we sell cattle, horses, sheep, goats, buffalo, and on occasion, a few exotic animals. In 2024, we sold close to 60,000 head of livestock with gross sales a little over $61 million. I'd like to give you just a little background on myself so you can understand just why I'm here today. I started working at the auction barn on Saturdays when I was 7 and worked 3 sales a week while I was at Texas A&M getting a degree in agriculture economics. I bought into Lockhart Auction 3 weeks after graduating in early 2018. This wasn't a family business I was given to run. It's my life work, and I'm trying to make sure my business and my producers are taken into consideration today. I'm here because our livestock industry is facing another screwworm outbreak, and screwworms and the protocol for handling them will impact me, my family, my customers, and my business directly. Please refer to LMAT's written comments for detailed testimony, and my testimony will be focused on our key concerns with NWS. A few minutes is not enough to convey the depth of the NWS situation and impact on Texas ranchers and hunters, but here are a few points to remember. I think it's been said a few times today, but sterile fly production is inadequate. To eradicate New World Screwworm from the U.S. and Mexico in the 60s and 70s, it took 600 to 700 million sterile flies per week. With existing production in Panama, plus the converted facility in Mexico, production is estimated to reach 200 million flies per week. Secondly, at this time, there are no USDA-approved products labeled to treat New World screwworm. We need access to products that are readily available and can be applied without a veterinarian. Even if we combine resources from USDA, Texas Animal Health Commission, and private sector vets, there will not be enough vets to inspect and treat New World screwworms. At this time, USDA and state animal health officials have indicated they will control New World screwworms through quarantines and movement controls. Quarantines and movement controls may be the best option when there are enough sterile flies to disperse over quarantine areas, but from our perspective, forcing livestock to remain within a control area to conduct a traceback process on a flesh-eating fly is just the incorrect response. I would like to make it clear that Texas Animal Health Commission sends one representative to our weekly cell. So in addition to Texas Animal Health Commission, we have employees designated to livestock evaluations. We pride ourselves in moving healthy, marketable cattle every week, which keeps our market active and competitive. We understand and are prepared to hire more employees for evaluations when New World screwworm gets here, but our barn being quarantined and restricted to movement from carrying out our weekly sale just cannot happen. So how can Texas help? First, supplemental funding for New World screwworms. We believe that Governor Abbott should expand the special session call and add New World screwworm to special session proclamation. Secondly, we believe that the Texas legislature should prioritize funding for the following activities. First, additional supplies and personnel for New World screwworm trapping and surveillance to complement USDA surveillance. Secondly, additional outreach and education for the livestock producers and hunters. And lastly, based upon our discussions with Congress and USDA, our belief is that the federal legislative and regulatory efforts to fund additional New World screwworm sterile fly production will take significant time. We believe the Texas legislature should expedite sterile fly facility funding. These facilities could be sold or leased to USDA or other states in the future. I think it's been clear today that the reemergence of the New World screwworm represents a serious threat not only to animal health, but to the economic stability of Texas livestock sector, a cornerstone of our state's agricultural economy. Thank you, Chair Guillen and the committee, for your attention to this critical issue and your commitment to safeguarding Texas livestock today and for the generations to come.
Thank you, ma'am. We have you registered as Damon Rogers, representing yourself,
Not really.
testifying on the subject.
I'm representing a lot of people, but I'm just one of them.
Yeah. But you would agree that it's representing yourself
For now, we'll just make it simple, all right? And you'll notice I don't have any notes.
No.
I don't need it. I'm just gonna speak from the heart, and I'm gonna be as succinct as possible. I'm gonna disagree with some of the people that came before me when it comes to the fact that we don't have enough manpower to address what's coming. And we both know it's coming. It's gonna get on this side of the border before too long. And the people that I claim to represent, I am one of. And I watched my dad and a mentor of mine that we just lost, named Cactus Jack Stevenson, he about raised me, fight this way back in the 70s. They were cowboys. That's how I make a living. I've also hauled cattle overseas on those big ships since 2012. I've been told, now I haven't checked this, I'm one of 3 men that hauls cattle overseas from the United States. It's kind of a cool thing to have behind your name. It means I know what I'm doing. Without being arrogant, what I do want to say, and everybody up here has been begging for money, but if we're going to address this, that guy was talking about a 3-legged stool a while ago, I'm going to put a 4th leg on it. We got to have boots on the ground, just like we have tick riders. Everybody here knows about the tick riders? Well, we got some boots on the ground, but we need to have some more that can go down there and address it and help those ranchers that don't have help anymore, that have aged out, or the kids have moved off. Call up, hey, we'll come by and help you. We'll brand, we'll vaccinate, we'll do whatever we got to do. But we're going to have some help money-wise. I don't need it. But the guys that I'm going to try to hire, and I can find them. I see guys all the time looking for work on all kind of websites, Facebook. There's pages, people looking for cowboy work. The American cowboy's not dead. You just can't see him from the road, guys. You got to get off the road. I can find them. Or I'll help you find them. They're out there, but we're gonna have to pay them a decent wage instead of like a lot of these guys do in the ranching business now that only wanna pay a little old cheap just enough. Well, you're getting the cowboy, that ought to be enough. So I'm not gonna tell you we gotta have the flies, you've already heard that. I'm not gonna tell you we gotta have the plants in America, you've already heard that. What I am gonna plead is we need boots on the ground for when it gets here, we're there to fight it. If we don't have that ahead of time, we're losing ground every day it's here. Do you agree or not? I mean, we gotta have boots on the ground. And if the guys, the ranchers won't pay for it, then the state of Texas and the feds need to step up and employ these guys to go out there and stop this. Otherwise, it's gonna end up in Oklahoma or wherever else it wants to go. So, it's that simple. I told you I'd be succinct, and my wife would be really proud of me for sitting there that long and listening that much and not saying a cotton-picking word.
Members, questions? Yep, Chairman Gitzman.
Thank you, sir. Thank y'all all again for participating today. You know, we've been talking about it here on the committee, but you being here today to help us spread the word a little farther and hopefully reemphasize how serious this is, we'll get a little more traction out of that. Ms. Bexley, you did a great job of explaining your situation, but I want to give you an opportunity to what this impact really is going to mean to you in your daily operation. I mean, the day that somebody comes to you and says we're quarantined or your facility is quarantined, what does that mean?
For sure. Thank you for giving me that time. From my understanding, as it stands today, if we were to have it tomorrow, I would be my cell barn would be quarantined, and the properties within a 6.2 mile radius around me would be quarantined as well. So, first of all, I would like to say that, you know, as a cattle auction barn, we are the pipeline for beef. It starts with us. We're the first person to talk to the producer, and we send the cattle on their way after that. But if we're quarantined and can't have a weekly sale or move the cattle auction, the cattle, you know, I don't know. Yeah, we will have empty plates, you know. What? Empty feed yards, empty plates. I want to also say that as it stands now, we would be quarantined and we couldn't be able to move them without multiple inspections and treatment. It just, you know, I do think it's going to be a problem because producers will stop participating. They won't call Texas Animal Health Commission and say, hey, I think I have a screwworm. We just won't have that participation, and we need that. The producers are the ones that see the cattle every day, and without their help, you know, that will get dumped all on us, and there's no way that we can treat treat screwworms as well as have a weekly cattle auction. So, you know, there's got to be a happy medium there.
Charles, you mentioned something about Beeville, a defense base, I think. Can you expand on that again?
Well, so, and I'm speaking from a small amount of information that I've gathered over the last week and a half. Navy Chase has been around, I guess, since World War I or World War II. I mean, it's been around a long time. And as per the Navy, when they started building runways, they did a great job. They put a lot of concrete down, and they put up some big buildings. And it has been ripe for an investment area ever since the Navy left in the 90s. It just hadn't gotten any traction other than TDCJ that happens to have the state has two prison facilities there on site. But other than that, it hadn't had a lot of traction. One of our directors just mentioned in passing a week and a half ago that might be a great opportunity outside of putting this facility at Mission, which is also another former military base, that maybe Navy Chase would be an option. And so we started pursuing that just internally to see if there is some opportunity there. And in a quick call to the director of Bee Development Authority, I think that's what it's called right now, Bee Development Authority, and a quick call with him, and it seemed like that facility checked a lot of the boxes on power and other infrastructure, the treatment plants that are on site, the existing hangars that might be a great place even for a temporary facility. The amount of land, the fact that it's not in a populated area, it's outside of town, would lend itself to building a production facility that is U.S.-based, that is Texas-based, that is flexible, that can be rented back to the federal government, rented back to the USDA as long as they need it for producing sterile flies. And because B County sits right in the middle, it's like an hour and a half from 4 different Texas A&M University system campuses, would also be something that we could turn back that facility to either the A&M University or the Extension Service and have a Tier 1 research facility that would be ongoing, so that we wouldn't have the issue of when we're done fighting flies, then it's turned back into nothing and left to expire. We could continue research there, insect and pest research, and then if the fly makes that reemergence and we need to deal with it again, then it's a lot easier to kick that back up because we're keeping that biosecurity level 2 facility up and going in a research mode. Obviously, there'll be a lot less people employed, but at the same time, it still would keep the facility up and going. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to pursue, and I think is that director still in the, he is.
So who owns the facility?
So Bee Development Authority owns the facility, and Michael Blair is their director. He can answer more questions for those of you that have an interest in that.
It's kind of like the EDC.
It's like the EDC, and again, the state created it for the purpose. The federal government gave that back to the state or the EDC. I don't know how all that worked. I wasn't involved in that, but the state created that 379B as a plan B for our defense bases. What can we do to get something out of it for this state? How can we get those jobs back into these communities that have lost, in the case of Beeville, 5,000 jobs for a city of 10 or 12,000 people. And so that was a significant loss. So the state started there, and they've done others like that. There's other development authorities that have made up a lot of ground in some other communities. But they're in Beeville. Navy Chase has not had that growth up till this point. And maybe it's specifically so it's available for this Plan B for the screwworm. I don't know. But it checks a lot of the boxes, and it's close enough to the border, both northern and southern border here in Texas, to fly worms wherever we want, or flies wherever we need to. Potentially, we could also turn around and start selling flies back into Mexico and South America, because transportation is a lot easier now than it was in the 60s and 70s when we fought it the first time. I think we can move these flies a lot farther, especially with modern aircraft. So maybe we even just continue growing the plant here stateside, and then not having to ever buy them again from Mexico. Even though costs may go up, security definitely goes up.
Members, any other questions?
May I add one more thing?
Yeah, please.
Sorry, I'm a little nervous today. I've never done this before, but I wanted to add, Dr. Ginges said that we're not in crisis mode yet, and I respectfully disagree with that. You know, if we don't get a plan implemented very soon, first of all, for us, knowing how we need to operate on a weekly basis, how we will continue to operate, and for our producers, we've got to get a plan in place where we know what to expect. We can prepare ourselves and our employees. We are in crisis mode. We need to get something figured out soon. We started talking about this 7 months ago, you know, and we don't have anything figured out yet. So anyway, I wanted to add that. Thank you.
Representative Lopez.
Mr. Rogers.
Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned about having people on the ground, like we did for the tick situation. Tell us a little bit more about that. What does that look like?
Well, the tick situation is handled by the USDA, the federal tick riders. I applied for that position when I worked for Cactus Jack. And I'm glad I didn't get it, because I wouldn't have met my wife. So, there goes that. But there are cowboys looking for jobs out there right and left. If we would go in there and pay them a decent wage and tell them, look, go down there, ply your trade. Cowboys have passion about what they do, otherwise they wouldn't be doing it. I'm 59, I'm still starting colts, training dogs, taking care of cattle. I can weld, I can drive a truck, I can operate machinery. This is what I want to do. I'm too hard-headed to do anything else. This is what I like to do. There's lots of them out there that have the same passion. If we put out that call, they're going to be there. It might take a little bit, but we've got to have, in my opinion, and that's the only thing I'm an expert on is cowboying. We've got to have somebody on the ground that's going to go, well, if I can't walk up to him and catch him, I need to be able to rope him. Well, they're out there. They really are. But that's what it looks like, is just putting out a call and paying them a decent wage where they can make a living. We can put them in man camps in certain spots and go. Let them go do their job. That's all those cowboys out there want to do. Just let me go do my job. Don't micromanage. Just let them go do their job. Let them go help the people. If one of them messes up, you're gone. Go find another one.
Appreciate you. And I do have another question for Mr. Letts with the Texas Wildlife Association. What is the Texas Wildlife Association doing right now?
Is related to screwworms?
That's related to this, yes.
We're attending a lot of the different, you've heard about a number of task forces, coalition groups. We participate in almost all of those. And we're just we're basically monitoring it, working with we talk to Parks and Wildlife, work with them, and we work very closely with Cattle Raisers Association and Farm Bureau and the others. So we're basically just working with the other groups and trying to get the information out to our members that this is a crisis. I agree with that.
Yep.
And something needs to be done, and just kind of get the information out. So that's kind of what we're doing right now.
Thank you.
I know everybody wants to go home, but she's right. We are in crisis mode. And it ain't nobody's fault, but we got to fix it. Simple as that.
All right, members, any other questions? Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
All right. If there's no further business and without objection, the House Committee on Agriculture and Livestock stands adjourned, subject to the call of the chair.